At my daughter's party, she humiliated me in front of 40 guests and snapped, "Write the check and leave." I signed $45,000 to cover the entire event like always. The son-in-law smirked. A week later, I signed another $180,000, her dream anniversary trip. She called me useless, yet took every dollar. What she didn't know, I hadn't stayed silent for 7 years, out of weakness. They thought they'd just received the most expensive gift of their lives, until that trip made everything start to collapse. This story begins with an impossible choice. Before we continue, please drop a comment and tell me, is it morning, afternoon, or late night, where you are right now? I read each one. Just a note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What matters most is the message this story carries. I stood in the middle of my daughter's backyard, wearing Costco khakis and holding a checkbook, while 40 guests pretended not to watch. The golden fairy lights strung between the oak trees made everything look softer than it was. Cressida Prescott, 32 years old, draped in something that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her Hermes Birkin dangling from her wrist like a trophy, stood near the gazebo with a microphone in her hand. 2.1 million people followed her on Instagram. I was her father, and I hadn't been invited to stay. "Dad, for the love of God, can you just write the check and leave?" she called across the lawn. Her voice carried over the hired string quartet. "You're embarrassing me in my own house." 40 faces turned. I recognized half of them from her social media influencers, brand partners, people whose job descriptions made no sense. The other half wore watches that cost more than I made in a year. My daughter rented this Bethesda mansion for $14,000 a month. The catering alone tonight ran $22,000. The photographer was another 12. Event coordination, 11. She'd sent me the invoice 3 days ago with a text that said one word, help. I walked to the artisanal pretzel station because apparently regular pretzels weren't good enough and opened my checkbook. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Behind me, someone's champagne glass clinked. Someone else laughed low and sharp. I wrote the numbers carefully, 45000, $45,000. The decimal point, 2 zeros. My signature at the bottom, practiced in small. I placed the check on the gift table between a bottle of Dom Perignon and a box wrapped in Tiffany blue. "Thank you, Daddy," Cressida said, already turning back to her guests. The microphone clicked off. My wife, Colleen, 58, and wearing a vintage Chanel jacket she'd bought on credit last spring, stood near the bar with 3 women in tennis whites. She glanced at me once, her expression carefully blank, then returned to her conversation. We'd been married 30 years. She hadn't said my name in front of her friends in 8 months. A small hand tugged my sleeve. Ledger Prescott, my grandson 7 years old, with a Pokemon journal tucked under his arm, looked up at me with worried eyes. "Grandpa, are we okay?" he whispered. I crouched down so we were level. "We will be, buddy." He nodded, but his mouth stayed tight. Kids always know when the adults are lying. I straightened and walked toward the side gate. No one said goodbye. Dashiell Wolf, 34, my son-in-law. Wearing a Tom Ford suit and a Richard Mille watch I knew was fake, because I'd seen the receipt stood near the koi pond talking to 3 men in Italian loafers. He caught my eye as I passed and raised his glass in a lazy salute. His smile didn't reach his eyes. My car, a 2011 Toyota Camry with a crack in the windshield and a dent in the passenger door, sat parked a block down the street. I'd learned years ago not to park in front of the house. Cressida said it lowered the aesthetic. The rain started as I pulled onto the highway toward Tyson's Corner, light at first just enough to blur the headlights of oncoming traffic. I turned the wipers on low and kept my speed steady at 62. The engine hummed, familiar and reliable. 300,000 miles and still running. How many times can a man sign away his dignity before the signature itself becomes evidence? I counted the lane markers, white dashes in the dark, the same question I'd been asking myself for 7 years. The phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. A text from Dashiell. "Dinner Sunday, bringing investors. You'll need to dress better. No Costco shit." I set the phone back down without responding. 2 minutes later, a voicemail notification appeared. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. Colleen's voice filled the car, measured and weary. "Richard, please don't embarrass yourself again like tonight. The club ladies were watching. I know you think these things don't matter, but they do. Call me when you get home so I know you made it safely." I deleted the voicemail. She'd called me Richard, my middle name, the one she used when she wanted distance between us. I hadn't been Julius to her in months. Just Richard. Just the man who signed checks and made her friends uncomfortable. The rain picked up. I merged onto the Tyson's exit and followed the familiar turns toward our house. The streets were empty. Most people were inside, watching television or putting kids to bed or doing whatever people did on Saturday nights when they weren't standing in their daughter's rented backyard holding a checkbook like a white flag. 40 guests. Not one asked if I was invited. Not one asked if I was staying. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. The rain drummed on the Camry's roof in a steady rhythm. The porch light was off. Colleen wouldn't be home for hours. She'd stay at the party, laughing with the club ladies, pretending her husband hadn't just walked out early like a hired contractor finishing a job. I sat in the dark and listened to the rain. In the glove box beneath the insurance papers and a stack of old gas station receipts sat a folder I hadn't opened in 3 days. I could feel its weight even without touching it, the kind of weight that doesn't show up on scales. I closed my eyes and let myself say the words out loud alone in the car where no one could hear. I have swallowed more insults than people think a human being can endure, perhaps because I know every sentence is a line item that will be repaid one day. The rain fell harder. I didn't move. Someone watching from the outside would see an old man in cheap khakis, sitting alone in a dented Camry. They'd see failure. They'd see exhaustion. They'd see exactly what I wanted them to see. None of them would see me counting. The house was dark when I finally went inside. I carried the folder from the glove box down to the basement office, the stairs creaking under my weight. The yellow desk lamp cast the only light in the house at 11 that night. I set the folder on the metal desk next to my moleskin notebook, the one that looked like every other Costco expense log, until you understood what the numbers really meant. I opened it to a fresh page and picked up the pen. To anyone glancing over my shoulder, the entries would look mundane. Milk $6.99, bread $4.50. Gas station receipt stapled to page 43. But the real content lived between the lines encoded in a Vigenère cipher I'd been maintaining for 7 years. The kind of cipher that requires a key phrase to decode. The kind no one looks for in a retiree's budget journal. I wrote carefully, translating as I went. Year 7, month 4, day 23. Subject D withdrew $45,000. Pattern ceremonial drain. Event classification, public humiliation with 40 witnesses. ROI to Falcone wallet projected within 48 hours. I flipped back through the pages. 7 years of entries. Every dinner check, every emergency loan, every birthday gift demanded with a smile and delivered with a check. The numbers told a story that would make sense to exactly 3 people on Earth, and 2 of them worked for the Bureau. I found the first entry. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear once decoded. Year 0, day 1. Daughter introduced subject J at family dinner. Falcone family ring the visible on left hand. Operation initiated. God help me. I remembered that night. Cressida had been 25, fresh out of her second failed startup, living in my basement, and talking about influence marketing like it was a real career. She'd brought home Dashiell Wolf, charming, well-dressed, too smooth for a man claiming to work in commercial real estate. And on his left hand, barely visible under his shirt sleeve, when he reached for the wine bottle, I'd seen it, the Falcone family crest, a ring that hadn't been worn openly in public since the RICO trials of 2001. I'd smiled, shaken his hand, welcomed him to the family. Then I'd gone downstairs and made a phone call that would define the next 7 years of my life. Every entry after that was a small bullet. No one dies from a small bullet, but count enough of them fire at the right pressure point and an entire empire can collapse. That's what the Bureau had taught me. That's what I'd been doing for 28 years, long before Dashiell Wolf ever walked through my door. Some men keep journals to remember their lives. I keep one to dismantle someone else's. I closed the moleskin and turned to the laptop. The Lenovo was old, covered in AARP member stickers and a fading decal from a cruise line Colleen had booked 3 years ago. To anyone watching, it was the computer of a man who checked email twice a week and got confused by software updates. I typed in the 38-character password. The screen flickered. The desktop wallpaper, a generic mountain landscape, dissolved. In its place, a black screen with green text, the kind that hadn't been standard since the 90s. Level 5, clearance. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Secure access granted. The header read, Operation Crimson Account, Year 28, Day 4. Below it, a single line of status text. 847 pages evidence accumulated. Final deposit cycle pending. Timeline 30 days. I scrolled through the case summary. Every transaction, every shell company, every wire transfer Daschle had made in the past 7 years, all traced back to a single source, his uncle. The man who still ran the Falcone distribution network from a safe house in Reading, Pennsylvania. The man who'd killed my brother in 2001 and walked away because we didn't have enough evidence to make the charges stick. I did now. I picked up the secure phone, a burner I replaced every 60 days, and dialed the only number programmed into it. 2 rings, then a voice alert despite the late hour. "Sir, you're up late." Theron Greer, 48 years old, my partner for 12 years. The only person at the bureau who knew the full scope of what I'd been doing in this basement while my family slept upstairs. We'd traded envelopes in Costco, parking lots passed, coded messages through book club newsletters, built an evidence file so airtight that even the best defense attorney in the country wouldn't find a crack. And Subject D made another withdrawal, I said quietly. 45,000. We're 30 days from the final cycle. I need a 90-day extension from the director. A pause. I heard the sound of a pen scratching paper. "I'll brief him Monday," Theron said. "Same Costco Wednesdays." Aisle 12, cereal section, 1045. Let's copy that. You doing okay? I looked around the basement. Concrete floor, metal desk, yellow lamp. The life I'd built is cover so convincing that even my wife believed it. 28 years, Theron. We're almost there. "Yes, sir. Get some sleep." The line went dead. 28 years. 8 of them lying next to a woman who thought she knew me. I shut down the laptop and watched the screen go dark. The AARP stickers reflected in the black glass. The mountain wallpaper reappeared for a split second before everything powered off. I climbed the stairs slowly. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing on the street outside. I'd lived in this house for 18 years, raised a daughter here, paid a mortgage, mowed the lawn every Saturday and summer. No one who looked at this house would ever guess what happened in the basement after midnight. Colleen was asleep when I entered the bedroom, facing away from my side of the bed. She'd changed into her silk nightgown, the expensive one she'd bought last month, and charged to a credit card I'd have to pay off next week. Her breathing was steady and deep. I lay down carefully, trying not to disturb the mattress. The ceiling fan turned in slow circles above us. I could hear her breathe, in, out, the rhythm of someone who slept without secrets. I turned my head toward her, though she couldn't hear me. "I'm sorry I had to be him for so long," I whispered. "I'm sorry I'll be him a little longer." She didn't move. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that downstairs in the basement, the laptop sat closed on the desk. 847 pages of evidence. A timeline counting down to a reckoning no one in this house could imagine. 30 days. Maybe less. I didn't sleep much that night. By Sunday afternoon, I'd already forgotten what rest felt like. The salmon was burning when Daschle's text arrived at 5:30, bringing 2 investors for dinner. Colleen wearing her vintage Chanel, and Rising Panic had forgotten to set the oven timer again. "They're early," she said, pulling the charred fish from the oven. "Can you just fix this? Make it look intentional?" I scraped the burnt edges into the trash and arranged what remained on the serving platter with lemon wedges and fresh dill. By the time the doorbell rang at 6, you couldn't tell we'd served salvage disaster. Daschle entered first, bringing with him the smell of expensive cologne and entitlement. Behind him came 2 men in suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Vincent Romano, 52. Silver hair, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, shook my hand without meeting my eyes. The kind of handshake that measured weakness. Anthony Costello, taller and younger at 48, wore a Brioni suit and carried himself like violence wrapped in silk. "This is my father-in-law," Daschle said, gesturing at me like I was furniture. "The accountant. Richard handles spreadsheets. Don't bore him with the real business talk." Vincent smiled. Anthony nodded. We sat at the dining table. Colleen brought out the salmon, her hands shaking slightly as she served. Cressida arrived late, breezing in with her phone already recording, filming herself hugging Daschle for her Instagram story, before acknowledging anyone else in the room. Daschle launched into his pitch: Web3, decentralization, blockchain infrastructure, words that sounded impressive until you realized they meant nothing. Vincent and Anthony listened with the practiced patience of men who'd heard 1,000 pitches and funded exactly 3. "Stick to your spreadsheets, old man," Daschle said when I reached for the water pitcher. "Let the grown-ups talk Web3. I poured water, said nothing. But I watched. Vincent adjusted his watch. As he did, his left hand brushed his right wrist in a gesture so subtle most people would miss it. A slow caress, 3 fingers trailing across the pulse point. Anthony mirrored it 30 seconds later, reaching for his wine glass. The Falcone family signature, the gesture that said, "I see you. I know you. We are the same." I'd seen it in surveillance footage from 2003, in undercover photos from the RICO trials, in a classified brief that cost 2 agents their lives to obtain. And now I was watching it happen 6 feet from my own dinner plate. I stood and carried the empty salmon platter to the kitchen. Through the wall I heard Vincent's voice drop to a whisper. "He's still slow. We can keep going." Dashiell laughed quietly. "I told you, he doesn't see anything. A good mask requires 2 people, the one who wears it and the one who looks away." I washed the plates slowly, carefully, giving them time to finish their conversation. When I returned to the table, they were discussing crypto wallets and offshore accounts like they were talking about the weather. Colleen smiled too brightly. Cressida filmed herself eating salmon. Dashiell poured wine for men who were counting how much more they could steal before someone noticed. And I sat there in my Costco khakis looking exactly like someone who didn't understand a word. Perfect. Tuesday morning, Cressida arrived at 9 without calling first. She let herself in with the spare key and set up her ring light in my living room, angling it toward the window for natural backlighting. "Don't move," she said, not to me, but to her phone. "I'm going live in 30 seconds. I sat at the kitchen table and watched her perform. "Good morning, queens," she said to the camera, her voice shifting into the bright, breathless tone she used online. "Welcome to my girl boss morning routine. Today we're manifesting abundance at my parents' house because real wealth is about energy, not location." 47,000 people were watching. I could see the viewer count climbing on her screen. She talked for 18 minutes about gratitude journals and manifestation and the importance of investing in yourself. Then she ended the stream, turned off the ring light, and slid a piece of paper across the table without looking at me. "I need $85,000, she said. "Launch event next Saturday. Mentorship program goes public. Sign here." I looked at the paper, a wire transfer authorization form already filled out except for my signature. "Like what launch event?" I asked. "What mentorship?" She sighed the kind of sigh that said I was wasting her time just by existing. "None of your business. Just sign. I don't have time to explain my career to someone who's never had one." $85,000, signed in 4 seconds. Not one question about where it would go. She took the paper, folded it into her Hermes bag, and walked out without saying goodbye. I waited until her car pulled away. Then I opened my laptop. The search took 3 minutes. Cressida Prescott Mentorship Program, How I Made $1 Million at 30. The top result was a Reddit thread. 463 comments, most of them angry. I started reading. Paid $11,000 in March for the mentorship program. No response to emails. Account blocked on Instagram when I asked for a refund. Gave her $8,500 from my divorce settlement. She promised one-on-one coaching. Got a PDF and a good luck babe text. $15,000 gone. She won't even read my DMs anymore. I scrolled through the thread. 32 documented victims. Some had paid $8,000, others $15,000. A few had been promised refunds that never came. One woman had driven to Cressida's rental mansion and been turned away by security. I did the math quickly. Conservative estimate $240,000. Worst case, $450,000. None of it refunded. None of it explained. All of it flowing somewhere. I opened a new tab and searched for the mentorship program's official website. Professional design. Testimonials that looked suspiciously similar. A FAQ section that promised results in 90 days or your money back. There was no refund policy, no contact information, just a link to buy the next tier for another $12,000. I sat back and stared at the screen. She hadn't just bled me dry. She was bleeding strangers, mothers, daughters, women who believed the promise of transformation and received nothing but silence in return. I closed the laptop but kept my hands on the keyboard, staring at my own reflection in the black glass. 30 victims documented online. 30 families who gave my daughter their savings and received nothing but blocked accounts in return. The question wasn't whether to add this to the evidence file. The question was how much longer I could watch her destroy lives before the case became complicit. The answer came 4 hours later when Colleen walked through the front door. She returned from the country club at 4 that Tuesday afternoon, smelling of Sancerre and carrying the specific kind of silence that meant she'd spent lunch comparing her husband to other women's successes. I heard her heels on the hardwood before I saw her face. She dropped her purse on the kitchen counter and opened the refrigerator without looking at me. Margaret's husband just made name a partner at Williams & Connolly. She said, her voice flat. They're building a place in Aspen, second home, cash. I said nothing. Yet Cynthia is cruising the Mediterranean on a yacht her husband bought outright. Outright Richard, no loan. She pulled out a bottle of white wine and poured herself a glass. Her hand shook slightly. Why couldn't you just have made manager? She wasn't looking at me. Just one promotion. Just once couldn't you have been the man they talk about at lunch instead of the one they pity? I know, I said. You know, she repeated. That's all you ever say. You know, like knowing makes it better. She drank half the glass in one swallow. I'm going to play poker online tonight, she said, turning toward the stairs. Don't bother me. It's the only thing that makes me feel like I'm winning at something. She disappeared upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. I stood in the kitchen and counted to 60. I knew it wasn't poker. It was live dealer blackjack streamed from a casino in San Jose, Costa Rica. I'd been tracing the offshore account since month 4. She thought she was being careful. Separate email. VPN service she'd found on a YouTube tutorial. Small deposits spread across 3 credit cards I didn't know she'd opened. The question wasn't if she was hiding it. The question was, how much? Last I checked, $180,000, give or take. Some wives hide affairs. Mine hides at a roulette table 4,000 miles away in Costa Rica. I sat down at the kitchen table and let my mind drift backward, not because I wanted to, because that's where it always went when the present became too heavy to carry alone. Christmas night, 2017. 7 years ago, almost to the month. The living room had smelled like ginger and cinnamon from the candles Colleen loved. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, white lights twinkling against silver ornaments. The floors creaked the way old houses do, the sound familiar and grounding. I was 53. Cressida was 25, fresh off her second failed business venture, living in our basement, and talking about becoming an influencer like it was a legitimate career path. She'd brought home a boyfriend, Dashiell Wolf, 27 years old, confident smile, firm handshake. He wore a suit that cost more than my monthly car payment and talked about commercial real estate with the smooth certainty of someone who'd practiced the lie. Nice to meet you, sir, he said, extending his hand. I shook it and looked down. The ring sat on his left hand, fourth finger, 18-karat gold, engraved with an olive branch held in a bird's beak. Simple, elegant, unmistakable. The Falcone family crest. I'd been studying that symbol for 15 years. I knew the weight of it, the history, the blood. I knew that men who wore that ring didn't work in commercial real estate. They worked for the family. They collected debts. They moved money. They married into targets. I smiled. Welcome to the family, son, I said. Tell me about your work. He talked for 20 minutes. I nodded in the right places, laughed at his jokes, offered him another slice of ham. Colleen beamed. Cressida held his hand like she'd won something. Then I excused myself to check on dessert. Outside, standing on the back porch in the cold December air, I pulled out the burner phone I kept in my coat pocket and dialed the only number programmed into it. 2 rings. Sinclair, Warren's voice, FBI director, my friend for 26 years, the only person alive who knew what I really was. I have him, I said quietly. Inside, Falcone soldier, the uncle's nephew, year 0 starting now. A pause. I heard Warren exhale slowly. Are you sure this is going to cost you everything, Richard? I looked through the kitchen window. Cressida was laughing. Dashiell had his arm around her waist. Tell me it's worth it, I said. It will be. Chess masters sacrifice pawns. Kings sacrifice daughters. I hung up and went back inside, served pie, made small talk, welcomed the man who would destroy my family into my home, and smiled while I did it. Because that's what the job required. Because 23 years earlier, in 1994, the same family had killed my brother in a warehouse in Baltimore, shot him twice in the chest, and left him to bleed out on a concrete floor while I was 3 states away on a surveillance op I couldn't abandon. I'd spent 2 decades building cases, watching targets, gathering evidence, and every single time someone higher up the chain walked away, someone with better lawyers, someone with deeper connections. Not this time. This time, the target had walked into my house and asked to marry my daughter. This time I had 7 years to build something airtight. I sat in the present-day kitchen and opened my eyes. Tuesday evening, September 2024. Upstairs, I could hear the faint sound of Colleen's laptop, the electronic chime of cards being dealt in a casino half a world away. 7 years. 84 months of watching Dashiell drain our accounts, of signing checks I knew funded laundering operations, of sitting across from Falcone soldiers at my own dinner table and pretending not to recognize their faces from surveillance photos. 84 months of watching Cressida fall deeper in love with a man I knew was poison from the first handshake. Every single day I asked myself the same question. Am I being a father or an agent? The answer had always been both. That was the problem. A father would have warned her, pulled her aside that Christmas night and told her the truth, shown her the evidence, saved her before she got in too deep. An agent would have let it play out. Documented every transaction. Used the relationship to get closer to the target. Sacrificed the daughter to catch the uncle. I'd done the second. I'd chosen the case over the child. And every night for 7 years, I'd lain awake in the dark next to a woman who thought I was weak and wondered if I was the kind of monster who could live with that choice. The answer apparently was yes. I could live with it. I just couldn't sleep. I slept 2 hours that night, maybe less. The email arrived at 7:30 Wednesday morning to the FBI honeypot account I'd embedded in Cressida's website 14 months earlier. I'd buried the code in the contact form invisible to users, invisible to her web developer routing every inquiry to a server in Quantico before forwarding to her actual inbox. The subject line made my coffee go cold in my hand. Please help, I have nowhere else to turn. I opened it. My name is Rachel Harper. I'm 34 years old. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I gave your daughter $11,000 from my divorce settlement after she promised to teach me her mentorship course. I thought I was investing in our future. After I paid, she blocked me on Instagram, TikTok, email, every platform. My daughter starts kindergarten next month. I'm facing eviction in 30 days. I don't know who else to write to. I don't know if you even know what she's doing. But if there's any way you can help, please. I'm begging you. I read it 14 times. Then I opened the dashboard folder labeled Daughter Pyramid Victims. 32 emails, some from March, some from June, some from last week. Women between the ages of 23 and 56, mothers, daughters. One recent widow who'd used her late husband's life insurance payout. $11,000 here, $15,000 there, $8,500 from someone who'd taken out a loan against her car. I did the math again slower this time, cross-referencing payment confirmations I'd pulled from the offshore account Cressida thought was hidden. $350,000. Gone. Every single one of them had been blocked after payment. Every single one had received nothing but a PDF and silence. I opened a reply window and started typing. Ms. Harper, help is on the way. Stand by 30 days, I promise. My finger hovered over the send button. I stared at the words for 60 seconds. Then I deleted them, saved the draft to a folder with a single note attached. Not yet, sorry. Every single mother is a line in the ledger. My daughter pushed them into a pit. I am pushing my daughter into a deeper one. I closed the laptop and went upstairs to shower. Colleen was still asleep. I could hear her breathing through the bedroom door. I didn't wake her. Friday morning, I sat in my cubicle at the insurance company in Reston, the same cubicle I'd occupied for 11 years. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a 2008 calendar on the wall that I'd never bothered to change because it was part of the costume. I was reviewing a claim for water damage when Dashiell walked in unannounced. He wore a Tom Ford suit that probably cost $4,000 and a Richard Mille watch on his wrist that he claimed was worth $200,000. I'd traced the purchase 3 months ago. AliExpress, $4,300. Fake serial number, close enough to fool most people, not close enough to fool someone who'd been studying counterfeits for 28 years. Pops, he said, not bothering to sit down. We need a quick signature. He slid a wire transfer form across my desk. $120,000. Recipient Crypto Ventures, LLC. Memo line, pre-sale allocation. Crypto fund, he said, checking his phone while he talked. Pre-sale ends Sunday. I'd explain the whole Web3 thing, but you wouldn't get it. Just need your signature. I picked up my pen. This is a lot of money, I said quietly. It's an investment, Pops. That's how wealth works. You sign, I make it grow. Everyone wins. He patted my shoulder like I was a child who'd just learned to tie his shoes. I knew you'd come through. Pizza on me next time. Maybe Costco pizza so you don't feel uncomfortable. I signed. He took the form without saying thank you and walked out. $120,000, signed in silence. Not one question asked, because questions are for fathers, not federal agents. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway. Then I pulled out the secure phone from my desk drawer and dialed. 2 rings. Greer. 120 just hit, I said. Trace it. I heard typing on the other end. Theron's fingers on a keyboard, pulling up real-time banking data that most Americans didn't know the FBI could access without a warrant when the account touched certain flagged institutions. You got it, he said. Routing through First National, then a shell in Delaware, then hold on. Third hop is a cryptocurrency exchange in Palermo, Sicily. I closed my eyes. Then same wallet as before, I asked. Same pattern, same obfuscation method, same final destination. Your son-in-law just confirmed the complete money laundering route on federal surveillance tape. He walked into your office, demanded a 6-figure wire, and sent it directly to the Falcone family's primary crypto conversion point. I exhaled slowly. How many threads does that complete? That's 14 of 14, Theron said. You've got wire fraud money laundering RICO predicates conspiracy, the whole chain documented, shell companies traced, crypto wallets mapped, family connections confirmed. Dashiell Wolf is Falcone's nephew, and he just tied himself to the organization with a ribbon. One more deposit cycle, I said. One more, Theron confirmed. Then we bring it to the director. Then we close it. I hung up and sat in the cubicle silence. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone in the next cubicle was laughing about something on their phone. Outside the window, traffic moved steadily along the Reston Parkway. 14 evidence threads complete. 32 pyramid victims documented in a folder I couldn't open without breaking operational security. $120,000 flowing to Sicily in real time. Rachel Harper's email still sitting in my drafts folder with 2 words attached, not yet. I looked at the calendar on my wall. September 2008. 16 years out of date. A perfect metaphor for a life frozen in cover identity. In 30 days, maybe less, this would all be over. The arrests would happen, the evidence would surface, the trial would begin. Cressida would learn that her father wasn't an accountant, that her husband was a criminal, that the FBI had been living in her house for 7 years documenting every transaction, recording every conversation, building a case that would send the people she loved to prison. She would learn that I'd known from the first handshake. And she would never forgive me. I understood that. I'd understood it since Christmas 2017. The question was never whether I could live with her hatred. The question was whether I could survive watching her walk into the trap I'd spent 7 years building. I found the answer Monday morning in a mahogany conference room at Quantico. I'd told Colleen I was driving to Detroit for a 3-day insurance conference. She didn't ask questions. She never did anymore. The room held classified maps of the Falcone empire spread across the table. Surveillance photos, wire transfer routes, shell company structures, and 8 faces that knew I'd been stalling the arrest for 14 months. Warren Sinclair sat at the head of the table, Theron Greer to his right. 5 task force agents whose names I'd memorized years ago filled the remaining seats. Warren didn't waste time on pleasantries. Richard, he said, his voice flat. You've had enough evidence for 14 months. Your daughter is running a pyramid scheme that hurts real people, women losing their savings. Mothers facing eviction. Why are you still sitting on this? I met his eyes across the table. That one more deposit, I said. I want the uncle, not just the nephew. You have the nephew cold, Warren said. RICO, money laundering, conspiracy. We can take Dashiell today and flip him, use him to get to the uncle. He won't flip. They all flip. Not this one. He's family, blood. He'd do 20 years before he'd testify against his uncle. Warren leaned back in his chair. You've been losing your daughter for 7 years, he said quietly. Are you sure she's still salvageable? Sikti beast horde, tabasquint. The room went silent. How do you tell the director of the FBI that your daughter stopped being salvageable the moment she chose to marry a man wearing your enemy's ring? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, counted to 15 in my head. She made her choices, I said finally. I'm preserving the case. Warren studied me for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You 30 days, he said. After that, we move with what we have, with or without the uncle. Understood? Understood." He tapped the table twice. Meeting adjourned. The agents filed out. Theron stayed behind, waiting until the room emptied. "You okay?" he asked quietly. No, I said. He nodded. There was nothing else to say. I drove back to Tyson's in silence. 3 hours on, I-95 windows down, radio off. Just the sound of the highway and the weight of 30 days pressing down like a closing vice. Wednesday evening, Colleen sat on the master bedroom bed with her laptop open. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard her make a small sound, not quite a gasp, more like surprise mixed with confusion. Richard, she called. Did you authorize this? I walked out, toothbrush still in hand. She turned the laptop toward me, an email confirmation from Soneva Johnny Maldives. 8 nights, Overwater Villa, 2 guests, Cressida Prescott and Dashiell Wolf. Charge amount $180,000. Visa ending in 3047. Our card. For their anniversary trip, Colleen asked. Do they need this much? I looked at the screen, at the resort name I'd seen in a classified briefing 3 weeks ago, at the dollar amount I'd authorized without telling her. Yes, I said. She stared at me. Richard, they wanted a memory. I said, my voice colder than I intended. I gave them one. She closed the laptop slowly. I don't understand you anymore, she said quietly. I know. She stood and walked to the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on a moment later. $180,000. Paradise. A Falcone shell. Every dollar another thread in the noose. I went downstairs to the basement office and locked the door behind me. The laptop booted up. 38-character password. The screen shifted from mountains to federal database. I pulled up the property file for Soneva Johnny Maldives. Ownership traced through 4 shell companies. Final holder, a Cayman Islands LLC, registered to a lawyer who'd represented the Falcone family in 3 separate RICO trials. The resort had been used for laundering operations since 2019. High-value guests, cash conversions, offshore transfers masked as luxury hospitality charges. Federal surveillance had been authorized 2 years ago. Cameras, audio, financial tracking. Every guest who stayed there ended up in a file. I opened the surveillance request form and typed, Own subjects, Cressida Prescott, Dashiell Wolf. Dates, October 12th to 20th, 2024. Booking confirmation attached. Request off full surveillance package, photographic audio, financial transaction monitoring. Subjects expected to enter Falcone-controlled property. Evidence threshold addition requested. I hit submit. The system processed for 30 seconds. Then a confirmation message appeared. Request approved. Surveillance activated. Evidence threshold +1. Subjects will be photographed entering Falcone restricted area within 30 days projected. Data will be admissible in federal prosecution under existing warrant 2022-OC-4471. I sat back and stared at the screen. 15 evidence threads. 30 days until closure. My daughter was going to fly to Paradise thinking it was an anniversary gift. She'd post photos on Instagram, smile for the camera, drink cocktails in an infinity pool overlooking the Indian Ocean. And every moment would be documented by federal agents building a case that would send her husband to prison. Maybe her too, depending on what the financial audits showed. I closed the laptop and listened to the water running through the ceiling. Colleen in the shower, washing away another day of a marriage she didn't understand anymore. She thought I was weak, pathetic, a man who couldn't say no to his own daughter. She had no idea I'd just sent that daughter into a surveillance trap that would photograph her walking into a mafia-owned resort with a man the FBI had been tracking for 7 years. She had no idea that every dollar I'd signed away was building a federal case. She had no idea her husband wasn't an accountant. And in 30 days when the arrests happened and the news broke and the trial began, she'd learn the truth about every lie I'd told her for the past 8 years. She'd learn I'd been FBI since before we met, that the accountant job was cover, that the weak man signing checks was actually a deputy assistant director running the longest undercover operation in bureau history. She'd learn I'd let our daughter marry a criminal to build a case. And she'd never forgive me either. I understood that too. The water stopped running upstairs. I heard Colleen's footsteps cross the bedroom floor. I stayed in the basement and stared at the dark laptop screen, seeing my own reflection in the black glass. 30 days. 15 evidence threads. One family about to shatter into pieces so small no one would ever be able to put it back together. The question wasn't whether the trap would spring anymore. The question was whether there would be anything left of my family when it did. I didn't go upstairs that night. I stayed in the basement until the question stopped mattering. At 4 Thursday morning, unable to sleep for the third night in a row, I opened the folder labeled Daughter Pyramid Victims and forced myself to read what I'd been documenting for 14 months without truly facing. 32 emails. I'd counted them, filed them, cross-referenced them with payment confirmations, but I'd never read them all in sequence. Email number 1, March 2023, Jennifer 38, single mother of 2. $8,000 from her divorce settlement after seeing a TikTok about financial freedom. After payment. Blocked on every platform. 3 months behind on rent. Email 7, Sarah 41, disability recipient. Paid for 3 months because Cressida promised she'd make it back in 6 weeks. Now she couldn't afford her daughter's asthma medication. Email 12, Robert 67. Liquidated his IRA because Cressida said her program changed her life at 30. $340 left. Winter was coming. I read them all. 12 single mothers who'd given money from divorce settlements or disability payments. 8 retirees who'd emptied retirement accounts. 12 recent college graduates who'd paid tuition money for courses that never materialized. Every email ended the same: blocked accounts, no refunds, no responses. I cross-referenced the payment trail. The money flowed through 4 shell identities, all managed by a lawyer Dashel paid annually to maintain. From there, direct deposits into Dashel's crypto fund, then conversion to offshore wallets, then Sicily, the Falcone family wallet. My daughter was feeding a money laundering operation and didn't even know it. Or maybe she did. I wasn't sure which version was worse. Is there any justice in the world that doesn't demand a piece of your soul as payment? I closed the laptop when the sun started coming up. I didn't draft any replies. I didn't send any help. I just logged the evidence and added it to the file. Thursday evening at 6, I stood by the 100-year-old oak tree in the backyard, smoking a cheap cigar from the gas station. Colleen hated when I smoked. I only did it when I needed to think. Theron arrived through the back gate carrying a Costco bag like a neighbor returning something borrowed. We'd met in the parking lot an hour earlier, standard protocol. He walked over and stood beside me without speaking. "You look like hell," he said finally. "I feel worse." He pulled out his own cigar and lit it. We stood in silence, 2 middle-aged men smoking in the fading daylight. "We can flip this," Theron said quietly. "Bust the pyramid now. Push your daughter toward cooperation. Get to the husband faster. Accelerate the timeline." I took a long drag and watched the smoke drift toward the fence. "And lose the uncle, no. We have enough on Dashel to—" "He won't flip," I said. "Not against family, you know that. So we let your daughter keep stealing—" "We need her on the pyramid arrest record," I said. "It's why she'll cooperate later. We go for all 3 at once. Daughter, husband, uncle, maximum pressure. RICO charges stick harder when everyone falls simultaneously." Theron was quiet for a long moment. "Richard," he said finally, "she's 32 years old. She's going to do federal time. I know. Real time, not probation, federal prison. I know. The state will be merciful. I will not. I've watched her destroy 32 lives," I said. "The state will be merciful enough." Theron studied me in the dimming light. "You're sure about this?" "No," I said, "but I'm doing it anyway." He nodded slowly, took one more drag, dropped the cigar, and crushed it under his shoe. 26 days, he said. "Then it's over. 26 days. He walked back through the gate without another word. I stayed by the oak tree until the cigar burned down. Then I went inside, past Colleen in the living room, watching something on her laptop, down to the basement office. I opened the secure FBI dashboard. The login screen appeared. There was a prompt I'd been ignoring for 3 weeks. Password expiration in 5 days. Update required. I clicked it. The system asked for a new password. 30-character minimum, mix of letters, numbers, symbols. I sat with my hands on the keyboard for a full minute. Then I typed, "My failure is no accident 2024 at $%. 30 characters. Every requirement met." I hit enter. The screen confirmed, password updated successfully. I stared at the words. Some men fail their daughters by accident, through neglect, through weakness, through absence. I was failing mine with federal precision and 28 years of practice. Every morning for the next 26 days, I would type that password. I would unlock the evidence file. I would read new victim emails. I would trace new transactions. I would document new frauds. And I would do nothing to stop it, because stopping it meant losing the case, losing the uncle, losing 28 years of work. Because I had chosen the mission over the daughter on Christmas night 2017, and every day since had been a continuation of that choice. Because there was no version of this story where I save both. I'd known that from the beginning. I just hadn't admitted it until now. The password was a confession disguised as security protocol, a reminder every morning that this wasn't an accident, wasn't a mistake, wasn't something that happened to me. It was something I chose, every single day, for 7 years. I logged out and closed the laptop. Upstairs, I could hear Colleen laughing at something on her screen. The sound felt distant, like it was coming from another house. 26 more days of typing my failure into a password field. 26 more days of watching my daughter destroy lives, while I built the evidence file that would destroy hers. 26 more days of pretending to be an accountant who couldn't say no instead of an agent who wouldn't. I sat in the basement darkness and listened to my wife laugh at something I'd never understand. And I wondered if there would be anything left of any of us when this was over. The answer came 2 days later, on a fog-covered golf course. Warren Sinclair's swing on the 7th hole that Saturday morning was an intentional miss, the kind of deliberate failure that signaled the conversation about to happen had nothing to do with par and everything to do with the 28-year operation approaching its final 30 days. The Congressional Country Club was deserted at 8 a.m. Just fog rolling across the fairway, and 2 men who'd known each other long enough to communicate through bad golf swings. Warren's ball landed in the rough exactly where he'd aimed it. We walked in silence until we were out of earshot of the clubhouse. CNN picked it up. Warren said quietly, pulling out a 7-iron he wouldn't use. Your daughter's pyramid scheme, 3-minute segment on financial fraud targeting millennial women. They interviewed 4 victims, used her Instagram handle, 2.1 million followers now watching her get destroyed in real time. I kept walking. We have 30 days maximum, Warren continued. Before the IRS gets there first and the case becomes tax fraud instead of organized crime. Before it stops being our jurisdiction and starts being theirs. Yes, then I have 30 days, I said. Warren stopped walking, turned to face me. Richard, he said, and his voice had the weight of 28 years behind it. After everything I need to ask, was it ever worth it? And was 28 years of hunting one family worth losing your own? Ask me when the handcuffs close. I'll tell you when we have the uncle in custody, I said. And if we don't, then I'll know. Warren studied me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his ball, set up, swung. Perfect drive, 280 yards straight down the center of the fairway. I took my position, matched his stance, swung. My ball landed 6 feet from his. Neither of us said another word until we reached the clubhouse. Sunday morning, I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee when Colleen walked in, carrying her iPad. Her face was already red before she said a word. Richard, she said, her voice shaking, there's $12,000 missing from the joint account. I didn't look up from my coffee. Every week, she continued, for 2 months, $24,000 total. Are you having an affair? Are you draining our savings? I set down my cup slowly. Is Helen... I said, using her real name, the one from 30 years ago, before we became the Prescotts. That's coming out of your account access, not mine. She stared at me. Check your withdrawal history, I said. She looked down at the iPad in her hands. Her fingers moved across the screen. I watched her face go from red to pale in the span of 15 seconds. She started. I know, I said. $12,000 every week for 8 weeks. Not stolen, gambled, by the wife accusing theft. She stood there frozen, the iPad shaking slightly in her hands. How long have you known? She whispered. Long enough? And you didn't say anything? I looked at her directly for the first time since she'd walked into the kitchen. Would it have stopped you? She had no answer. She turned and walked upstairs without another word. I heard the bedroom door close. I sat alone in the kitchen and let my coffee go cold. 3 months of escalation, $12,000 weekly. $96,000 total if I counted the withdrawals I'd traced back to June. She wasn't just gambling, she was losing, systematically, consistently, to a Costa Rican blackjack site designed specifically to exploit addiction patterns in middle-aged women with disposable income and social shame. I'd traced the site months ago. Offshore registration, no regulatory oversight, payout algorithms designed to create intermittent reinforcement, just enough wins to keep players hooked. Never enough to break even. But sitting in the kitchen that Sunday morning, a different thought crystallized. Someone had introduced Colleen to that site. Someone who knew her well enough to understand that her fear of the country club lady's judgment would keep her silent about the losses. Someone who benefited from having my wife drowning in secret debt she couldn't confess. I pulled out my phone and opened the tracking file I'd been maintaining on Colleen's digital activity. Scrolled back, found the first login to the Costa Rican site. 26 months ago, Cressida had been expanding her pyramid scheme, recruiting new victims, building her influencer platform, laundering money through Dashiell's crypto operations. 26 months ago, my daughter had needed her mother, distracted, desperate, complicit in the family's collective denial. I sat very still. The pattern was too clean, too deliberate. Gambling addiction doesn't appear overnight in a woman who'd never shown interest in casinos or online betting. It gets introduced, recommended, sold as entertainment or stress relief or a way to feel powerful. Someone had sent Colleen that first link, that first referral message, that first promise of easy money and private thrills. Someone who understood that a wife drowning in shame would never question her daughter's sudden wealth. Someone who knew that financial desperation makes people blind. I looked up at the ceiling, could hear Colleen moving around in the bedroom above me, probably deleting her browser history, probably changing passwords, probably trying to hide evidence I'd already documented 14 months ago. My coffee had gone completely cold. I didn't get up to make more. I just sat there thinking about the mathematics of family destruction. One daughter running a pyramid scheme. One son-in-law laundering money for the mafia. One wife addicted to offshore gambling. One husband documenting it all for federal prosecution. And somewhere in the evidence file I'd been building for 7 years was a referral message sent 26 months ago that would tell me exactly who'd introduced my wife to her addiction. I already knew the answer. I waited until Sunday night to prove it. The FBI forensic hacking tool loaded onto Colleen's iPad at 11:30 while she slept upstairs, her breathing steady and unaware that her husband was about to trace every Costa Rican blackjack hand she'd played for 26 months back to the person who'd taught her how to lose. The basement office was dark except for the glow of my laptop. I'd copied the iPad's encrypted data to the FBI server using root access protocols that technically required a warrant. I had 14 of them. This operation had more legal coverage than most federal buildings. The gambling site's transaction history appeared on my screen. Clean, professional, designed to look legitimate. 26 months of activity. $12,000 deposited weekly. $9,000 to $10,000 returned in a consistent losing pattern that kept the addiction alive without completely draining the account. The algorithm was sophisticated, designed to sustain hope while ensuring steady losses. I calculated quickly. Total deposits $310,000. Total withdrawals $130,000. Net loss $180,000, not counting the overdraft fees and offshore credit she'd taken out to cover the gaps. I scrolled to the beginning, the first message, the referral that started it all. Sent 26 months ago, March 2022, from Cressida Prescott. Mom, you're stressed. Try this. It's how I keep myself happy. A link, a smile emoji, a virtual hug. My daughter had introduced her own mother to a gambling addiction. Some daughters protect their mothers. Mine weaponized hers. I sat in the darkness and read the message 14 times. She didn't just bleed me. She didn't just defraud 32 victims. She deliberately addicted the woman who raised her to a site designed to exploit shame and social anxiety. She'd known exactly what she was doing, known that Colleen's fear of the country club ladies would keep her silent, known that a mother drowning in debt would never question her daughter's sudden wealth, known that guilt and shame would paralyze any intervention. I closed the laptop. The case wasn't a side effect anymore. It was mercy. Monday afternoon at 2, I sat across from Colleen at a corner table in a suburban Starbucks. The crowd was sparse, a few college students with laptops, a mother with a stroller, no one paying attention to a middle-aged couple having a quiet conversation. I placed the folder on the table between us. $180,000, I said quietly. Costa Rica, 26 months, I've known. Colleen stared at the folder like it was a grenade. Richard I. Dandip, open it. She opened it with shaking hands. Transaction histories, site screenshots, withdrawal patterns, all of it documented with federal precision. She started crying, not loud, just silent tears running down her face while she flipped through pages that proved her secret had never been secret at all. Richard, I'm sick, she whispered. I can't stop. The shame is I can't tell anyone. The ladies at the club would... And idiamons aspid. Helen, I said using her real name, who introduced you to the site. She went very still. 30 seconds of silence. I counted them. Finally, barely audible. Cressida? She said it was a way to make money quietly, to not have to depend on you, to have something of my own. $180,000. 26 months. Introduced by the daughter she was trying not to burden. I showed no reaction, just closed the folder and pulled it back to my side of the table. I'll handle it, I said. Colleen looked up, tears still on her face. What do you mean, handle it? You're going to keep playing for 30 more days, I said. Then we talk. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Keep, Richard. I just told you I can't stop. I need help. I need 30 days, I repeated. Then we talk. What are you going to do about Cressida? I stood up, put the folder under my arm. 30 days, I said again. She grabbed my wrist across the table. Her hand was cold. Richard, what does handle it mean? I didn't answer. She held my wrist tighter. Who are you? She whispered. I looked down at her. At the woman I'd been married to for 30 years. The woman who thought she knew me. The woman who'd called me Richard for decades without ever questioning whether that was the whole truth. Someone who fixes problems, I said. I pulled my wrist free and walked out. Behind me, through the Starbucks window, I could see her sitting frozen at the table, staring at the empty space where the folder had been, staring at the husband who'd just told her to keep gambling for 30 more days, staring at a man she was starting to realize she'd never actually known. I got in my Camry and sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes. 30 days until operation closure. 30 days until simultaneous arrests. 30 days until Colleen discovered that the weak accountant she'd pitied for 3 decades had been documenting every dollar, every fraud, every betrayal with federal precision. 30 days until she learned her daughter was going to federal prison. 30 days until she learned her husband had been FBI since before they met. 30 days until she learned the man called Richard had been someone else entirely. I started the engine and drove home. That night, Colleen didn't come downstairs for dinner. I heard her moving around in the bedroom, pacing, probably trying to understand what had just happened at Starbucks, probably trying to reconcile the man who'd signed checks without argument for 7 years with the man who'd just produced a federal-level surveillance file on her own gambling addiction, probably asking herself the question she'd whispered across the table. Who are you, Richard? The answer was simple. I was the man who'd spent 28 years hunting the family that killed my brother. I was the man who'd let his daughter marry a mafia plant to build a case. I was the man who documented his wife's gambling addiction without intervening because stopping it would compromise the timeline. I was the man who'd chosen the mission over the family on Christmas night 2017 and every single day since. I was exactly who I'd always been. She just hadn't known it until now. The question followed me home from Starbucks and waited in the bedroom. The suitcase lay half-packed on the bed. Monday evening at 9, Colleen's hands frozen on a folded blouse. When I walked in and said the 4 words that made her realize leaving might be more dangerous than staying. I need you here. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying since she got home. I should leave, she said quietly. I deserve it. After what I've done. After what she... No, I said, stay. Richard, I don't even know what's happening. I don't know who you are anymore. I don't... The 30 more days, I said. Stay for 30 more days. Then we'll discuss everything. She stared at me. Why? Because I'm asking. What are you doing? Her voice was barely a whisper. What are you planning? I sat down on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the half-packed suitcase. I want you to do me one favor, I said. Pretend nothing has changed. Continue everything as before. The country club, the dinners, the family gatherings. Everything exactly as it's been. Colleen looked at me for a long time. 30 seconds, maybe more. Who are you, Richard? How long can you live with someone and not know them? 30 years, apparently. Maybe 31. Your husband, I said. For 30 days. Then we'll see. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just held the folded blouse in her hands and stared at me like I was a stranger who'd broken into our bedroom wearing my face. Then slowly she set the blouse down on the bed. Sat down beside it. Stopped packing. 30 days, she said. 30 days. She didn't ask any more questions. Just started unpacking what she'd already folded, putting clothes back in drawers, hanging blouses back in the closet. I left her there and went downstairs to the basement office. 30 days until operation closure. 30 days until she learned the truth about everything. 30 days of pretending to be the man she thought she'd married. I could manage that. I'd been managing it for 8 years already. Wednesday morning at 7, I came downstairs to find Colleen in the kitchen drinking coffee. She was dressed earlier than usual, standing by the window, watching. "In morning," I said. She turned, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Morning," she said. I poured my coffee, grabbed my briefcase, headed for the door. "Have a good day," she said behind me. I paused, turned back. She was watching me with the kind of attention she hadn't shown in years, really looking at me, studying me. "You too," I said. I walked out to the Camry and drove toward work. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known from inside the car, was that Colleen stayed at that window for 15 minutes after I left, watching my taillights disappear down the street, thinking. I didn't know that she'd been watching me differently since Monday, noticing things she'd stopped noticing years ago. I didn't know that she'd started paying attention to my patterns, my routines, the small deviations that most wives would miss. I didn't know that she'd noticed something I'd been doing every Wednesday for 12 years. Colleen stood at the kitchen window and thought about Wednesdays. Every Wednesday morning, Julius left for work at 7, same time as the other 6 days, same route, same destination, the insurance company in Reston. But every Wednesday, and only Wednesday, his route included a 15 to 20-minute detour through the Costco parking lot in Tysons, 7:30 a.m. every single week. Colleen had noticed it months ago, maybe a year ago. She couldn't remember exactly when, but once she'd noticed, she couldn't stop noticing. Every Wednesday, 7:30 a.m., 15 minutes. For how long? Months, years. How much did I not see? What did someone do at a Costco parking lot at 7:30 in the morning? The store wasn't even open yet. She'd asked him once casually, 6 months ago. "Do you stop at Costco on Wednesdays?" He'd said no. Just a brief pause to check work emails before arriving at the office. Quiet place to think. She'd believed him. She didn't believe him anymore. Not after Monday's Starbucks conversation. Not after the folder documenting her gambling with federal precision. Not after he'd told her to keep gambling for exactly 30 more days. Not after he'd asked, "Who are you, Richard?" And he'd answered like a man giving a mission briefing instead of a husband. Something happened on Wednesdays that didn't happen the other 6 days. Something he'd hidden for what might be months, might be years. Something that required 15 minutes in a parking lot at 7:30 in the morning. Colleen poured her coffee down the sink and made a decision. Next Wednesday she would follow him. Rent a car. Different car. Something he wouldn't recognize from the rearview mirror. Sunglasses. Hat. Stay 2 or 3 cars back. She'd see what he did when he thought no one was watching. She'd see who he met, what he did, why 15 minutes in a Costco parking lot was part of his routine. She'd see who her husband really was. After 30 years of marriage, she didn't know. After 30 days, she would. Colleen stood at the window long after my taillights had disappeared, planning, calculating, thinking about surveillance techniques she'd learned from crime shows and documentaries. She didn't know she was about to surveil a man who'd spent 28 years teaching federal agents how to avoid surveillance. She didn't know the Costco parking lot was where I'd been meeting Theron Greer every Wednesday for 12 years. She didn't know the 15-minute detour was a classified handoff protocol we'd developed in 2012. She didn't know that next Wednesday she was going to discover exactly who her husband was. And she didn't know that discovery would happen exactly 1 week before I'd planned to tell her. But standing in my Reston office cubicle that Wednesday morning, staring at the unchanged 2008 calendar on my wall, I felt something shift, a change in air pressure, the kind you feel before a storm. 23 days until operation closure. 23 days until everything came out anyway. I told myself it didn't matter if Colleen discovered the truth a week early. I told myself the timeline could absorb the disruption. I told myself I had everything under control. I was wrong about all 3. 7 days later, she was ready. The rented BMW felt foreign beneath Colleen's hands that Wednesday morning at 7:25. Unfamiliar steering wheel, unfamiliar mirrors, unfamiliar woman wearing sunglasses and a hat to follow her own husband through Tyson's Corner, traffic like a detective tailing a suspect. She parked 200 feet from the Costco entrance, far enough to stay invisible, close enough to see. 7:28 a.m. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. 7:29? 7:30 exactly. My Camry pulled into the parking lot and stopped in the usual spot 3 rows from the entrance. I got out, checked my watch, looked around the empty lot. Colleen held her breath, A black Suburban pulled in 30 seconds later. Two men emerged, black suits, professional. The kind of men who stood with their backs straight and their hands ready. They walked toward my car. One of them, the taller one, early 50s gray at the temples, carried a manila envelope. I shook both their hands. The taller one handed me the envelope. I opened it, looked inside, nodded. We talked for 5 minutes. I signed something, handed it back. Colleen watched from 200 feet away and pulled out her iPhone. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She opened the camera, zoomed in, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times magnification. The screen shook with her pulse. She focused on the taller agent's chest. There, a metallic badge clipped to his belt, bold letters. FBI, FBI, 3 letters, 30 years. How many Wednesday mornings? How many lies at breakfast? Colleen dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. Her hands froze on the steering wheel. She watched me shake hands with the agents again, watched them get back in their Suburban, watched me get back in my Camry, watched me drive away like it was just another Wednesday, just another morning, just another 15 minutes in a Costco parking lot exchanging envelopes with federal agents. She sat in the rented BMW for 20 minutes after I left, just breathing, just trying to understand what she'd seen. FBI, her husband, every Wednesday. For how long? Before I tell you what happened in that kitchen that night, are you still with me? Comment whether you'd want to know your spouse's secret identity after 30 years, yes or no. And tell me why in 5 words. Quick note: what follows includes dramatized details for emotional impact. The truth behind it is what matters. Wednesday evening at 7, I walked into the kitchen to find Colleen sitting at the table with her laptop open. "Sit down, Richard," she said. Her voice was steady, too steady. I sat. She turned the laptop toward me and pressed play. The video showed the Costco parking lot, my Camry, the black Suburban, the 2 agents, and then zoomed in perfectly clear the FBI badge on Theron's chest. She paused the video. "Who are you?" she asked. I looked at the screen, at the badge frozen in 30 times magnification, at the evidence my wife had just handed me that she knew. 10 seconds of silence. Then I said what I'd known I'd have to say eventually. "Sit down properly, Helen," I said, using her real name. "Once I tell you this, you can't unhear it, and you can't tell anyone. Not Cressida, not your sister, not your therapist, not the ladies at the club, no one." She nodded slowly. I took a breath. "I'm the Deputy Assistant Director of the Organized Crime Section at FBI headquarters," I said. "I have been for 22 years. Before that, I was a special agent. I started at 28. The insurance accountant, the cubicle, the spreadsheets, the cheap khakis, it's cover. It has always been cover. 22 years. The accountant never existed." Colleen stared at me. "The man I married was a federal agent," I said. "Yes. The weak man who couldn't make manager was the deputy assistant director of one of the most powerful sections in the bureau. The man who signed checks without argument, or offband decisibarst, was documenting every dollar for a federal investigation." She stood up, sat back down, stood up again. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have you been deceiving me?" I looked at her across the kitchen table, at the woman I'd been married to for 30 years, the woman who'd just asked me to define the boundary between love and lies. "Define deceiving," I said, because the truth was complicated, because I'd been assigned to date her in 1995 as part of a federal investigation into her father's distribution network, because I'd fallen in love with her somewhere between year 2 and year 3, because I'd married her knowing the wedding was both genuine and operational, because I'd spent 30 years being both her husband and a federal agent, and I'd never figured out where one ended and the other began. "Define deceiving," I repeated. Colleen sat very still. "You're asking me to calculate," she said slowly, "whether falling in love with someone you were assigned to surveil counts as honesty or just a different category of lie." "Yes," I said. "And you want me to decide whether the last 30 years were real or cover." "I want you to understand that they were both," I said. "And that's the problem." She looked at the laptop, at the frozen image of the FBI badge, at the proof that the man she'd married had been someone else entirely. "What operation?" she asked quietly. "I can't tell you that." "Does it involve our family?" I didn't answer. "Does it involve Cressida?" I didn't answer. "Does it involve Dashiell?" I looked at her directly. "I can't tell you that," I said again. But my silence told her everything. She stood up and walked to the window. stared out at the backyard where we'd hosted birthday parties and graduation celebrations and Sunday dinners for 7 years. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "About Dashiell, about whatever he is." I could have lied, could have said I'd just discovered it recently, could have given her a timeline that made me look less like a monster, but I'd already asked her to define deceiving. I owed her at least one honest answer. "Ever since Christmas 2017, I said. The night he shook my hand. Colleen turned around slowly. "You've known for 7 years, she said. You let our daughter marry him. You let him into our house. You signed checks. You played grandfather to their son for 7 years. Yes. Why? Because stopping it would have compromised the case." "The case," she repeated. "You chose the case over our daughter." "Yes." She looked at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe I'd always been. She didn't leave. Not yet. The interrogation began at 9 that Wednesday night, with Colleen's first question, Cressida, and didn't end until 3 in the morning, when I finally admitted the one truth I'd been protecting for 30 years involved the wife asking the questions. We moved from the kitchen to the living room somewhere around midnight. Colleen drank lemon water. I drank whiskey neat. She asked questions. I answered them. No elaboration, no comfort, just truth. "Cressida," like she said, "did she know about you about Dashiell? No, I said. She's collateral." Colleen's hand shook on her glass. "Collateral," she repeated. "Yes. Our daughter is collateral damage in your federal case." "Yes." She set down the glass. "Dashiell?" "He's the case," I said. "A Falcone soldier. I've known since year 2. Year 2 of what? Their marriage." "You've known for 5 years." "Yes." "And you let it continue?" "Yes." She stood up, walked to the window, came back, sat down. "A ledger," she said. "Our grandson." I took a drink. "That ledger is the only one I never lied to," I said. "He's 7. 7-year-olds get the truth." Colleen stared at me. "What truth?" "That grandpa has to work sometimes. That grown-ups have complicated jobs. That I love him? And he believes you." "Because it's true." 6 hours, 4 family members. 1 answer per question. No elaboration, no comfort, just truth. At 2 in the morning, Colleen asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Me," she said quietly. "What about me? What am I in this operation? Collateral cover, wife?" I looked at her across the living room. 30 years of marriage sitting between us, like evidence. 30 seconds of silence. "We need to talk about that," I said. "Tomorrow morning, not now." "Why not now?" "Because if I tell you tonight, you'll leave before sunrise," I said. "I need you to choose with daylight." She stood up. "I'm sleeping on the sofa," she said. I didn't stop her. She grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and arranged it on the couch. Lay down, turned away from me. I sat in the chair across from her and finished my whiskey. At 3 a.m., I went upstairs to the bedroom alone. Thursday morning at 8, I came downstairs to find Colleen already sitting at the breakfast table. She'd made coffee, poured 2 cups. She hadn't touched hers. I put bread in the toaster. "You don't have to make breakfast," she said. "I know." The toast popped. I buttered it, put it on a plate in front of her. She didn't eat it. I sat down across from her with my coffee. In 1995, I said I was 28 years old, a brand new FBI agent, barely 2 years out of Quantico. They assigned me to a small case in Pittsburgh. Colleen didn't move. A man importing brown heroin from Sicily through a textile front? I continued. A mid-level distributor, not a big fish, just someone feeding the network. I took a sip of coffee. But the big fish, the real target he'd eaten, everyone above him in the chain. Consolidated power, eliminated competition, including 4 years earlier, my younger brother. Colleen's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. "Hey, James," I said. "My younger brother. He was 23 when they killed him." She set down her cup carefully. "James," she said. "The brother who died in a car accident. James, 23 years old, murdered. 30 years of car accident lies." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. Then I shattered them. "There was no car accident, Helen," I said. "There was Falcone." The name landed like a stone in water. "Falcone," she repeated. "The same organized crime family I've been hunting for 28 years, I said. The same family whose soldier married our daughter 7 years ago. The same family whose nephew sleeps in our daughter's bed." Colleen's face went pale. "Dashiell," she whispered. "Is the nephew of the man who killed my brother," I finished. "Yes." She stood up so fast her chair fell backward. You knew, she said. When he shook your hand at Christmas, when they got engaged, when they got married, when Ledger was born, you knew. I knew. And you let it happen. I let it happen. Because of the case. Because of James. She picked up her coffee cup and threw it against the wall. It shattered. Coffee ran down the white paint in dark streaks. I didn't move. Your brother died 30 years ago, she said, her voice shaking. You've been hunting this family for 3 decades, and when their soldier walked into our house wearing a ring you recognized, you smiled and welcomed him and let him marry our daughter because you wanted revenge more than you wanted to protect her. Not revenge, I said quietly. Justice. What's the difference? Justice has a trial. Revenge has a body. She stared at me. You're insane, she whispered. I'm federal, I said. There's a difference. Not a big one, but it exists. When were you going to tell me? I wasn't, I said, until you followed me to Costco. So I forced your hand. You accelerated the timeline. What timeline? I looked at her directly. The arrests, I said. They're coming, soon. How soon? Soon enough that I needed you to know before it happened. Colleen walked to the sink, turned on the water, washed her hands for no reason, turned off the water, stood with her back to me. Your brother, she said quietly. James, tell me what really happened. He was 23, I said, working as a courier. He didn't know what he was moving, just thought it was a job. When he figured it out and tried to leave, they killed him. Made it look like a car accident, single vehicle, drove off a bridge in Baltimore. And you've been hunting them ever since. Since his funeral, I said, 28 years. She turned around. When you were assigned to the Pittsburgh case, she said slowly. The distributor, the textile front, that was the same family Sky off. Yes. And you were 28, brand new agent. Yes. Now how did you get close to him? The distributor. I looked at my coffee. At the toast she hadn't touched. At the 30 years of breakfast tables between the first lie and this moment. Tomorrow, I said. I'll tell you tomorrow. No, she said. Now, how did you get close to him? I met her eyes. You're not going to like the answer. I don't like any of this, she said. Tell me anyway. I took a breath. They assigned me to date his daughter, I said. How do you tell your wife that the first 18 months of your courtship were assigned by the FBI? I watched Colleen pour her second cup of coffee at our Tyson's breakfast table, the Thursday morning light catching the tremor in her hands. 3 hours of sleep. 6 hours of interrogation. And now this, the question I'd dodged for 30 years. In 1995, I said, the Bureau assigned me to date a woman named Helen Marie's daughter. The coffee pot hovered midair. Your mother wasn't just connected to the Falcone distribution network. She was running the Northern Virginia pipeline. And you, 23, working at PNC Bank. Going to Pirates games every Friday, you were my access point. Colleen set the pot down with surgical precision. Access point. The seats at Three Rivers Stadium weren't coincidence. Section 127 row, K. The Bureau bought the season tickets 2 months before I happened to sit next to you during the Braves game. Your beer spilled on my jacket. You apologized. I said it was fine. That entire conversation was scripted in a Quantico briefing room. Her face had gone perfectly still. The first 18 months, every date, every phone call, every time I showed up at your apartment, with takeout that was operational. My handler reviewed my contact reports every Sunday. Build rapport, establish trust. Don't push for intel, let her volunteer it. I was 26 years old and following a manual on how to make you fall in love with me. Did it work? Her voice was ice. Yes, I met her eyes. And then somewhere between year 2 and year 3, I stopped filing the reports the way they wanted. I started writing no significant intelligence gathered, when I'd actually learned that your mother's Tuesday poker games were handoff meetings. I buried leads. I slow-walked follow-ups. Because by then, Colleen, don't. She stood abruptly. Don't you dare tell me you fell in love. I fell in love with you, I said anyway. The Bureau wanted an asset. I gave them a wife. I've spent 27 years wondering if that disqualifies me or makes me the only real husband you've ever had. The coffee cup never reached her lips. She set it down, walked to the sliding glass door, and stepped into the backyard without a word. I watched her cross the lawn to the old oak tree, the same tree where we'd buried our daughter's time capsule in 2008, where I'd proposed the second time after the first ring was too small. where every August we hung the hummingbird feeder she claimed brought good luck. She sat beneath it and didn't move. I gave her an hour, then 2, then 4. From the kitchen window I could see her shoulders rise and fall, with breath her phone dark on the grass beside her hands folded in her lap, like she was praying or calculating or both. What I couldn't see, the way her mind was rewinding 30 years of memories and inserting new subtitles. Our first anniversary, I'd canceled dinner last minute. Work emergency, I'd said. What I meant, Quantico briefing on your mother's new supplier. Cressida's 5th birthday party, I'd arrived 2 hours late, distracted, barely present. What I'd been doing, debriefing a surveillance team that had photographed your mother with Vincent Falcone's nephew. Our 18th anniversary, I'd seemed distant all week. What I was thinking, in 3 days I'll be 60, and this operation will be older than my marriage. Every memory now had 2 timestamps, the one she'd lived, the one I'd filed. But here's what she was realizing sitting under that oak tree with the 4 hours of silence and the 30 years of evidence. The operation didn't make the love false. It made it complicated. I'd lied about how we started, but I hadn't lied about staying. I'd deceived her about my assignment, but I'd chosen her over my career advancement 7 times when transferring would have been easier. I'd hidden my vendetta against the Falcones, but I'd never hidden that I'd take a bullet for her or our daughter without hesitation. Love built on lies isn't a house of cards. It's a house built on a fault line. The foundation shifts, the walls crack, but if the frame is strong enough, it stands. She stood at 2:17 p.m., brushed the grass from her jeans, and walked back toward the house. I met her at the door. The first 18 months, she said slowly, were an operation. Yes, and the next 28 years were me choosing you, I said, every single day. She studied my face the way she used to study balance sheets at the bank, looking for the number that didn't add up, the transaction that revealed everything. When Cressida was born, she said, "You cried in the delivery room. Was that real?" "Yes." "When your mother died and you didn't speak for 3 days, was that real?" "Yes." "When you told me last year that marrying me was the best decision you ever made?" "The second best," I corrected quietly. "The best was deciding to stay." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to hold you were assigned to me and you love me in the same sentence." "I've been holding them for 30 years, I said. "It doesn't get easier, but it's the truth." She nodded slowly, and I saw her jaw set the way it did when she'd made a decision she couldn't unmake. "It was real," she said finally. "It was also strategic. I don't know how to hold both at the same time, but I have to." I installed the monitoring software on Colleen's phone while she showered. Thursday evening, 6 hours after her oak tree epiphany, she'd come to my basement office with the kind of calm that only arrives after you've exhausted every other emotion. No tears, no anger, just the flatness of someone who'd done the math and accepted the equation. 30 days, she said, standing in the doorway. "I'll play the role. 2 more Sunday dinners as the perfect wife and mother. No contact with Cressida about the truth. After the operation closes, we talk, figure out if there's an us left." I nodded. "Operational protocol requires monitoring, even on you." She didn't flinch. "Of course it does." That's when I knew she understood what I'd been trying to explain for 6 hours of interrogation and 4 hours of silence in my world. Love and surveillance weren't contradictions. They were operational realities running on parallel tracks. The software went active at 6:47 p.m. SMS logs, call metadata, GPS pings, every keystroke flagged for bureau review. She'd agreed to the alliance. I'd agreed to monitor her anyway. Trust apparently had a 30-day expiration date. Friday morning, I briefed the task force at Quantico. The OCS war room was standing room. Only 14 agents, 3 analysts, Director Warren Sinclair at the head of the table, with his reading glasses perched like a judgment. Theron sat to my right, case files stacked in front of him like evidence of every compromise we'd made to get here. I clicked to the operational timeline slide. D-Day is October 25th, 14 days. 3 simultaneous arrests at 0600 hours. I pointed to the first photo. Cressida Prescott, LAX International Terminal. Gateside apprehension before the Seoul flight boards. Dashiell Wolf residence in Georgetown. 6:15 synchronized entry. Uncle's Pennsylvania safe house. Simultaneous breach by the Pittsburgh field office. Sinclair leaned forward. "You're monitoring your own wife. If she tips Cressida in the next 2 weeks, 28 years, burns. If she leaks, I said evenly, that's evidence too. The room went silent. Theron shifted beside me. We've got redundancy. Cressida's phone is tapped. Dashiell's cryptocurrency wallets are flagged. If Colleen sends so much as a coded text, we'll know before the message delivers. Sinclair removed his glasses. You're asking me to trust a woman who just discovered her marriage is a bureau operation while simultaneously planning to arrest her daughter and son-in-law. That's not redundancy, Julius. That's a powder keg with a 30-day fuse. It's operational reality, I said. She stays in the dark, she's a liability. She knows the truth, she's a risk. There's no clean option. I'm choosing the risk I can monitor. How many marriages survive being reclassified as operational assets? Sinclair studied me for a long moment, then nodded. 14 days. If she breaks, we move early. Understood. Understood. I drove home with the weight of his question sitting in my passenger seat. Colleen wasn't just monitored, she was evidence. Every text she sent, every call she didn't make, every Sunday dinner she performed flawlessly would either prove her alliance or condemn it. And I'd be the one reviewing the logs. Sunday dinner arrived like a final exam neither of us had studied for. Colleen set the table with her usual precision cloth napkins, the good china ledger's plastic cup, positioned just out of elbow sweep range. Cressida arrived first, phone already live streaming to her 63,000 followers, panning across our dining room like it was a museum exhibit of suburban mediocrity. See, she said to the camera, boring suburban house, salmon and small talk. This is what 53 looks like when you marry a government salary. Colleen smiled without teeth. We're so glad you could join us, sweetheart. Dashiell arrived 10 minutes later, laptop bag in hand, already pitching before his coat was off. 220 for the Crypto Academy beta launch, he said, sliding into his chair. ROI projections in your email. We're talking 8-month break even if we hit 50 enrollments in Q1. I cut my salmon. We can discuss it after dinner. It's time sensitive. The blockchain conference is November 15th. Epasizi, after dinner, Dashiell. Colleen passed the asparagus to Cressida with the kind of maternal warmth that would have fooled me if I hadn't installed the monitoring software myself. She was performing flawlessly. Every smile timed every question, calibrated every movement designed to project the kind of mother who had no idea her daughter was 14 days from a federal arrest. I watched her across the table and wondered which version was real, the woman who'd sat under the oak tree for 4 hours. Or the one serving green beans like our family wasn't a tactical operation with a countdown clock. Ledger passed the green beans without being asked. The 6-year-old had been quiet all dinner, his usual chatter about kindergarten and Lego builds, replaced by the kind of watchful silence that children deploy when the adults are lying. He pushed salmon around his plate, glanced between his mother and grandfather, and finally set down his fork. Cressida was mid-sentence about her cryptocurrency mentorship program, when Ledger's small hand reached for my sleeve. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "are we okay?" The table went silent. Cressida's phone was still recording. Dashiell's fork hovered mid-air. Colleen's smile froze in place, and I saw the micro-expression she couldn't quite suppress, the flash of pain that came from a 6-year-old seeing through operational cover that had fooled seasoned agents. I covered Ledger's hand with my own. His fingers were sticky with butter, his eyes holding worry he shouldn't understand at his age. "We will be buddy," I said. "Eat your salmon." He nodded, slowly pulled his hand back and picked up his fork. But he didn't eat. And across the table, Colleen met my eyes with the kind of look that said, "What we both knew, you can monitor phones, brief task forces, and coordinate simultaneous arrests across 3 states. But you can't lie to a 6-year-old who loves you. Not well enough. Not when it counts." The 847-page binder weighed 6 pounds 4 ounces. I'd weighed it that morning on the kitchen scale while Ledger ate his Cheerios and asked if Grandma was mad at me. I'd told him no. Another lie in a week of them. By 8:30 p.m. Sunday night, the binder was waiting in my basement office while the family drifted from the dining room to the living room with the kind of post-dinner lethargy that suggested nobody was in a hurry to leave. Dashiell stretched across our sofa like he owned it. One arm draped over the back cushions, the other scrolling his phone. Cressida sat cross-legged in the armchair live stream, paused for once, picking at her nail polish with the boredom of someone who'd performed Suburban Daughter for 2 hours and was ready for the costume to come off. Dashiell set his phone down. "So, 220 to the LLC by Wednesday. Beta launches Friday, early investor calls Monday. Wire instructions are in the email I sent Thursday." Cressida glanced up. Dad always says yes eventually. Why make him pretend to think about it? Colleen sat perfectly still on the love seat, hands folded in her lap, her face arranged in the expression we'd practiced, attentive neutral. The kind of wife who listens while her husband considers financial requests from their son-in-law. She didn't look at me. Operational protocol. The Crypto Academy model is scalable. Daschle continued, warming to his pitch. We're talking six-figure revenue by Q2 if we capture even 5% of the retail investor market. Your 220 becomes 440 in 18 months. Conservative estimate. I set my coffee cup down. Give me a minute. I have something in the office. Daschle's smile was easy. Take your time. Numbers don't lie. I walked to the basement stairs, descended into the fluorescent-lit office where I'd spent 28 years filing reports and building cases, and lifted the binder from my desk. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, 28 years of surveillance wire, transfers, cryptocurrency wallets, pyramid structures, victim statements, and Falcone family connections, all of it bound in black vinyl with metal rings that clicked when you opened them. 5 days earlier, I'd brought Colleen down here to rehearse. When I bring the binder out, I'd said, "You sit still, no cues, no tells, they can't know you already know." She'd been standing by the filing cabinet, arms crossed, still processing the Thursday morning revelation that our marriage had started as an operational assignment. The wound was fresh. The alliance was fragile, but she'd agreed to play the role. "What do I do with my face?" she'd asked. "Nothing. Let them read whatever they need to read. Shock, confusion, betrayal. It's all plausible. Because it's all true." I'd nodded. Yes. She'd walked to the chair across from my desk, sat down and folded her hands exactly the way she was sitting now, 5 days later in our living room. Practicing. When Daschle opens it, I'd said, "Cressida will look at you. She'll want to know if you knew, if you're part of this. Your job is to give her nothing. And if she asks me directly, you don't answer, you don't have to. The binder does the talking." Colleen had stared at the empty space on my desk, where the binder would eventually sit. "They'll think I'm shocked," she'd said quietly. "Discovering my husband has been investigating my daughter and son-in-law for years. What am I really—" I'd met her eyes. "Between you and your conscience?" She didn't ask what would be on page 1. Maybe she didn't want to know. Maybe she'd already guessed. Or maybe, and this was the possibility that had kept me awake for 5 nights straight, she decided that whatever was in those 847 pages, her job was to sit still and let it happen. Not because she agreed, not because she forgave me, but because 30 days of operational alliance meant playing the role even when it destroyed her. We had rehearsed the silence for 20 minutes. She'd sat motionless while I'd walked through the scenario. Daschle's request, my exit to the office, my return with the binder. The moment of placement, the instruction to open it. She'd practiced keeping her face neutral, her hands folded her, breathing steady. "What if I can't do it?" she'd asked. "You will," I'd said. "You're stronger than you think." Or more complicit. I hadn't corrected her. Now, 5 days later, I climbed the basement stairs with the binder pressed against my chest, feeling its weight distribute across my forearms like evidence too heavy to carry alone. The living room came into view, Daschle still sprawled on the sofa, Cressida examining her nails, Colleen frozen in her rehearsed position. I walked to the coffee table and set the binder down. 28 years of investigation makes a sound when it hits a coffee table. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's the soft, dense thud of compressed paper and metal rings and documented truth landing between people who thought they were having a casual Sunday evening conversation about cryptocurrency investments. Daschle looked up. His smile faded. Cressida's hands stopped moving. Colleen didn't blink. The binder sat between us like a black vinyl wall 6 inches thick, the spine labeled in my own handwriting. Prescott Wolf Investigation /1996 to 2024 /evidence compilation. About that 220, I said. Daschle's eyes dropped to the binder, then back to my face. What is that? I pulled the nearest chair and sat down across from him, the coffee table between us. The binder positioned exactly center. Colleen was to my left, still motionless. Cressida had straightened in her armchair, phone forgotten. It's 28 years of documentation, I said evenly. Wire transfers, shell companies, victim statements, cryptocurrency wallets, pyramid recruitment structures, and Falcone family connections. All of it indexed, cross-referenced, and ready for federal prosecution. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cressida's voice was small. "Dad," I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Dashiell, watching the calculation happen behind his face, the mental accounting of how much I could possibly know, how long I'd known it, whether this was a bluff or a reckoning. I slid the binder 2 inches toward him. "Open it," I said. "Page 1. Dashiell's hand lifted from the sofa, cushion hovered in the air between us, fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. But he didn't move. And in the silence that followed, the kind of silence that forms when 30 years of lies meet 6 pounds of evidence, cold dread settled over the room, like fog rolling in from a coast nobody had seen coming. Dashiell's finger trembled as he turned to page 1, a photograph of his own hand, Christmas 2017, wearing the Falcone ring. The image was sharp professional surveillance quality, zoomed to capture the distinctive falcon head insignia in gold against his knuckle as he'd reached across our holiday table to shake my hand. The timestamp in the corner read December 24th, 2017, 1847-03, 7 years ago. The day I'd known exactly who he was and why he'd married my daughter. He stared at the photo for 10 seconds before turning to page 2. Page 2 was the ring's provenance report. Falcone family crest, commissioned 1963, distributed to 37 soldiers between 1970 to 2018. Dashiell's name appeared on line 22. Received January 2015, 3 years before he'd met Cressida. His breathing accelerated. Page 47. My brother James's homicide dossier. Crime scene photos from 1991. Witness statements. Falcone family connection confirmed by the Philadelphia field office. Cause of death reclassified from traffic accident to targeted elimination. 33 years of lies documented in 8 pages of Bureau investigation I'd personally requested, reopened in 1996. "Dad," Cressida whispered, "what is this? Why do you have this?" I didn't answer. I nodded toward the binder. "Keep reading." Dashiell turned to page 100, wire transfer records. The full trail, $1.8 million, routed through shell companies in the Caymans, Luxembourg, and finally Sicily. Every transaction EID, every intermediary account, every Falcone family member who touched the funds. His signature appeared on 14 authorization forms. Page 200, the pyramid scheme organizational chart. 32 victims arranged in recruitment tiers, dollar amounts beside each name, Dashiell's position at the apex. Rachel Harper's $11,000 loss highlighted in yellow. My own staged $45,000 investment circled in red with the annotation FBI operational funds, authorized. Jesus, Dashiell breathed. Page 400 made him stop turning. It was Colleen's gambling documentation. Every login to the offshore poker sites. Every deposit, every loss, every withdrawal. The $180,000 total calculated at the bottom of the page. And beneath it, Cressida Prescott, referral commission, $7,200, deposited to account number 443-1-9AX. Dashiell looked up at my wife. "You documented your own wife." "Keep reading," I said. Colleen sat motionless, hands folded, face neutral, exactly as we'd rehearsed 5 days earlier. She didn't flinch. She didn't defend me. She didn't confirm or deny. She simply sat there while her son-in-law discovered that even her addiction had been cataloged as evidence. Cressida was watching her mother, searching for a reaction, finding none. Page 600, Maldives resort surveillance photographs. Dashiell and his uncle on the beach. Dashiell at the casino cage. Dashiell in the hotel business center, uploading cryptocurrency wallet addresses, 12 photos, 3 angles. Complete timeline of the February trip, where he'd told Cressida he was attending a blockchain conference. The pages kept turning. Page 700, page 800. Evidence layered on evidence. Each sheet stripping another molecule of deniability until the entire structure of his life stood exposed like an X-ray. Cressida stopped breathing for 11 seconds. I counted them. Watched her chest freeze mid-inhale as Dashiell turned to page 847. The final page, a single-line summary. Typed in Bureau Standard Format. Subject, Dashiell Marcus Wolf. Status, active target. Recommendation, federal arrest. Warrant approved. Then she gasped a small broken sound that 28 years of operational training didn't prepare me to hear from my own daughter. I stood. Deputy Assistant Director Julius Prescott, I said. Organized Crime Section Federal Bureau of Investigation. 28 years active. Cressida's face went white. You're not my father? You're FBI? I'm both, I said. I've always been both. No, she shook her head. No, you're a compliance analyst. You work from home. I run a 26-agent task force investigating the Falcone crime family's East Coast money laundering operations. The basement office you've visited your entire life is a satellite station with encrypted bureau access. The compliance work is cover. It has been since 1996. Daschle set the binder down slowly like it might detonate. Your uncle, I continued looking at him, killed my brother in 1991. The Bureau assigned me to infiltrate the distribution network in 1995. I met your wife's mother, Helen Marie, that year. Married Colleen in 1997. You married Cressida because Falcone sent you. I knew when I shook your hand, Christmas 2017. I've known everything since. Cressida stood abruptly. Mom, tell me this isn't... But Colleen stayed frozen, and I saw my daughter's face crack when she realized her mother already knew. Operation Crimson Account closes Tuesday morning, I said. Federal arrests execute in 36 hours. You'll be taken into custody at sunrise. How do you arrest your own son-in-law without arresting your daughter's heart? You don't. You just do your job and let the heart break where it falls. Daschle bolted. He was fast younger, panicked pure survival instinct, driving him across the living room toward the front door. His hand hit the knob, twisted, pulled it open 6 inches before 2 figures stepped into the doorway from the darkness outside. Agent Marcus Hartley, 42-15-year Bureau veteran, filled the left side of the frame with his shoulders. Agent Nicole Moss, 37 former SWAT, took the right. Both had their credentials visible, both positioned with the kind of casual authority that said they'd been standing out there for hours. Step back inside, Mr. Wolf, Hartley said quietly. Daschle froze in the doorway, half in, half out. His escape route physically blocked by federal agents he hadn't known existed 30 seconds ago. He turned slowly to face me. How long have they been out there? Since you arrived, I said. 4 other agents cover the back exit and side windows. You were never leaving this house without Bureau permission. The door clicked shut. Moss stepped inside just far enough to make her presence clear, then positioned herself near the entry. Hartley stayed on the porch, visible through the window. Daschle's shoulders sagged. His knees buckled slightly, and he collapsed back into the sofa seat he'd been lounging in 40 minutes earlier, when this was just a casual Sunday evening, and his father-in-law was just asking for a minute to think about a cryptocurrency investment. His hands were shaking. I remained standing, my voice flat operational. You'll be arrested at sunrise, I said. Until then, sit still. 4 agents at the exits, my daughter weeping on the sofa, my wife silent in the chair, my son-in-law's hands zip-tied. This was victory. It didn't feel like victory. By 10:30 p.m., the living room had transformed into a containment zone. Hartley stood near the front door, arms crossed, eyes scanning. Moss positioned herself by the kitchen entry. 2 more agents I'd briefed that afternoon. Reynolds at the back sliding door, Chen, covering the garage, formed a perimeter that turned our Tyson's home into a holding cell with upholstered furniture. Daschle sat motionless on the sofa, plastic zip ties cutting into his wrists. His earlier bravado replaced by the flat-eyed stare of someone doing mental calculations about plea deals and prison terms. Cressida hadn't stopped crying for 40 minutes. How could you do this? She looked at me like I was a stranger wearing her father's face. He's my husband, Ledger's father. I'd been waiting for this question, dreading it, preparing the answer for 7 years. Ledger's biological father, I said quietly, has been in witness protection since 2019. His name is sealed by federal court order. He cooperated with the Bureau in exchange for safety and anonymity. Daschle is not your son's father. He's Falcone's plant. The color drained from her face. You're lying, she whispered. That's not Ledger looks like his actual father, I said, whom you dated for 8 months before Daschle was assigned to you. The timeline was tight. Falcone needed you pregnant and married before you asked questions. It worked. Colleen's hands tightened in her lap, but she didn't speak, still following the script, still performing neutral witness while I dismantled our daughter's entire reality. Cressida turned to Daschle. Tell him he's wrong. Tell him Ledger is yours. Daschle stared at the floor. The pyramid scheme. I continued. has documented losses of $350,000 across 32 victims. You recruited 14 of them personally. Your commission was $47,000. The LAX arrest executes at 0600 hours. You'll be processed, arraigned, and transferred to federal detention by noon. Cressida's voice broke. 32 people. That's... Dad, please. There has to be... There isn't. I kept my tone flat. Operational. The evidence is documented. The warrants are signed. The operation closes in 8 hours. She stood abruptly. I need the bathroom. I watched her cross the living room toward the hallway, her steps too quick, her shoulders too rigid. Colleen's eyes followed her daughter with the kind of maternal tracking that doesn't require conscious thought. We both saw it, the desperation, the calculation, the bathroom excuse that wasn't about bathrooms. Hartley shifted his weight, ready to follow. I shook my head. Let her go. Let her send whatever message she thought would help. The phone was monitored. Every keystroke flagged, every contact logged. 2 hours later, I was proven right. The spyware ping sounded like a heartbeat flatlining. 12:32 a.m., my basement office. The surveillance dashboard lit with an intercept notification, subject H, outbound SMS, recipient subject A, flagged for review. Subject H Colleen, subject A Cressida. I clicked the notification. The message loaded in the center panel, white text on black background, the kind of sterile formatting that made 30 years of marriage look like a case file. Run, cash only, Mexico, now. They're coming in the morning, trust me. Sent at 12:31 a.m., delivered 12 seconds ago. Read receipt pending. I sat in 60 seconds of silence while my heart cracked along a fault line that had been forming since the Oak Tree conversation, since the coach performance rehearsal, since the moment I'd asked her to choose between me and our daughter, and pretended there was ever any universe where she wouldn't choose Cressida. The 30-day agreement, the false alliance, the promise to sit still and let the operation close without interference. 7 days. She'd lasted 7 days. I opened the operational dashboard and typed, Subject H confirmed. Second betrayal. LAX intercept activate. Adjust timeline by 4 hours. Execute arrests 0200. Hours vice 0600. Flight risk elevated. Mobile surveillance to Dulles. LAX. Mexico City routes. Coordinate with CBP. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the muscle memory of 28 years filing reports. Every word precise, every instruction clear, no emotion, no hesitation. Just the mechanical documentation of evidence that would be cited in federal court when they asked why the arrests happened at 2 a.m. instead of dawn. Exhibit 47, H, Subject H text message advising Subject A to flee jurisdiction. What's the operational protocol for logging your own wife's betrayal? You document the timestamp, you classify the threat level, you update the tactical plan. You don't call upstairs and ask why. You don't confront. You don't give her the chance to explain that she's a mother before she's an operational asset, that 30 days was always an impossible ask, that choosing your daughter over your husband's vendetta isn't betrayal, it's biology. You just type the report and hit send. The dashboard updated timeline, adjusted, all teams notified, arrests execute, 0200. October 14th, 2024. 4 hours earlier than planned. 4 hours less for Cressida to run. 4 hours less for Colleen to warn anyone else. I didn't go upstairs. Didn't knock on our bedroom door. Didn't ask her if she understood what she'd done, or whether she thought I wouldn't notice, or whether 30 years of marriage earned her the right to sabotage a federal operation. I sat in the basement darkness, staring at the intercepted text on my screen, watching the read receipt change from pending to read to typing to nothing. Cressida hadn't responded. Smart girl. Or maybe just smart enough to know that responding to a warning about surveillance while under surveillance was the kind of mistake that turned witness into co-conspirator. Upstairs, I heard Colleen's footsteps cross from the bedroom to Cressida's old room where we'd set up the guest bed. Heard the door close. Heard the house settle into the kind of silence that forms when everyone is awake but pretending to sleep. 30 years of marriage weighed against 30 days of promised cooperation. She'd chosen. And now, sitting in the fluorescent glow of surveillance monitors, watching real-time GPS dots converge on our house as FBI tactical teams prepared for pre-dawn arrests, reading and rereading the 12 words my wife had sent our daughter to help her escape federal custody, I chose two. Not her, not reconciliation, not the possibility that after the operation closed, we'd figure out if there was an U.S. left. The operation, the mission, the 28-year vendetta that had cost me a brother, a marriage, and whatever remained of my daughter's trust. I whispered to the empty room, my voice barely audible over the hum of the computer fans. 30 years. She had 30 days to choose. She chose. Now I choose. 3 tactical teams, 3 time zones, 3 targets, 28 years converging on 6 minutes. I stood on my porch at 5 a.m. Monday morning. October, cold biting through my jacket, holding a bureau-issued tablet displaying 3 live surveillance feeds. Left L, AX Terminal, 4 Gate B12. Passengers queuing for the Mexico City flight. Center my own front door. Hartley and Moss positioned waiting. Right reading Pennsylvania safe house. 16 agents in tactical gear surrounding a colonial where the Falcone Dawn had been sleeping. Colleen's betrayal text had moved everything up. Original timeline 10 a.m., arrests civilized hour full daylight. Her warning to Cressida changed the math. Accelerate deployment to 2 a.m. Position teams while targets sleep. Execute at dawn before anyone realizes the trap has closed. 4 hours earlier than planned. 4 hours less for my daughter to run. Hartley's voice crackled through my earpiece. LAX team in position. Target approaching gate B12. She's carrying 1 bag. I zoomed the left panel. Cressida in oversized sunglasses and hoodie, pulling a black roller bag, walking with purposeful speed. She'd left Tyson's at 3:47 a.m., drove to Dulles, rerouted to LAX when the Mexico City flight wouldn't board until noon. Smart, adaptive. Everything I'd taught her about problem-solving now weaponized against a federal operation. Moss's voice. Residence team ready, subject still in bedroom. Dashiell sleeping in my daughter's childhood bedroom, zip ties removed after 4 hours of monitored rest. Small mercy before federal custody. The third feed showed Reading P, A agents at every exit, snipers on rooftops, tactical van, idling. S.A.C. Elena Rodriguez, 51 26-year Bureau veteran, led the team. She'd coordinated 63 organized crime arrests in her career. This would be 64. I keyed the radio. All teams execute on my mark at 0600, 60 seconds. Agents adjusted positions. Hartley's hand moved to his credentials. Rodriguez gave a hand signal that rippled through her team. I watched Cressida reach gate B12. She checked the departure board. Mexico City. On time. Found a seat, pulled out her phone. Cressida's flight to Mexico never had a chance. Surveillance algorithms flagged her ticket at 2:14 a.m. LAX team deployed at 3 o'clock. Gate B12 secured at 4:30. Every exit monitored, every seat occupied by federal agents or brief security. She'd walked into a controlled environment thinking she was escaping one. My thumb hovered over the transmit button. 28 years of preparation. 14,000 mornings waking up as someone else. 1 brother murdered, 1 marriage destroyed, 1 daughter about to be arrested for crimes her husband committed and her grandfather documented. I pressed transmit, execute. Left panel 4 agents converged on Cressida. She looked up as the first agent, tall female, credentials visible, approached. Cressida Prescott, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Cressida's face went white. Her phone slipped from her hand. Handcuffs clicked. Center panel. Hartley and Moss entered through the front door I'd unlocked remotely. 12 steps to the stairs. 14 steps up. Third door on the right. The door opened. Dashiell Marcus Wolf, FBI, RICO conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud, bigamy. You're under federal arrest. 25 to life minimum. Don't move. Dashiell sat up, already awake, already knowing this moment had been coming since the binder hit the coffee table 9 hours ago. Right panel, Rodriguez's team breached simultaneously front, back, garage, basement. 12 agents flooding the safe house in 4 seconds. The Dawn, 73 years old, 47 federal counts, 3 decades evading prosecution, was pulled from bed in striped pajamas, hands cuffed before he understood what was happening. Rodriguez's voice, reading P, a target secured, 47 counts. He's alive. 6 minutes, 3 arrests, 28 years. I kept my eyes on the left panel. Cressida stood at gate B12, in handcuffs, 2 agents flanking her passengers, backing away with phones out filming. She turned slowly, scanning the terminal, and then her eyes found the camera like she'd known I'd be watching. The security camera above gate B12 captured her face in perfect detail. Not angry, not defiant, just hollow, empty. The look of someone whose reality had been dismantled in 72 hours and now stood in handcuffs while strangers filmed her arrest. She stared directly into the lens. My operational mask cracked. I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed it, run simulations where I watched my daughter's arrest with professional detachment, cataloged it as operational success, moved on without emotional interference. But preparation doesn't account for the way her eyes found that camera, doesn't account for the recognition in her face, the certainty that her father was watching, monitoring her arrest the same way he'd monitored her entire life. Doesn't account for how 28 years of victory tastes like ash and irreversible loss. I lifted the tablet closer, my voice barely a whisper, words she'd never hear. I love you, I'm sorry. The radio crackled, all targets secured, Operation Crimson account complete. On the screen, Cressida mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, couldn't read her lips, couldn't know if she was speaking to me or to herself, or to the hollow space where trust used to live. The camera feed cut to black. Standard protocol, arrests complete, surveillance terminated, evidence logged. I stood on my porch holding a dead tablet screen. October dawn, breaking over Tyson's, my house full of agents processing Dashiell's arrest. My wife somewhere upstairs, silent with documented betrayal. My daughter in federal custody 3 time zones away. 28 years. Complete. CNN played it on loop. Influencer Cressida Prescott, 2.1 million followers, arrested in $350,000 pyramid scheme. Father, FBI Deputy Assistant Director. Tuesday morning, 24 hours after the arrests, the living room television cycled through versions of the same devastation. TMZ had aerial footage of the LAX arrest. The New York Times ran a 6,000-word investigative piece titled, "The FBI Father Who Built a Case Against His Daughter's Husband for 28 Years." OS BuzzFeed compiled Cressida's most viewed TikToks under the headline, "From Crypto Queen to Federal Defendant." 32 pyramid victims had already filed a class action lawsuit. Their attorney, a theatrical man named Gerald Hutchins, who'd given 4 press conferences in 18. Ours promised accountability for every dollar stolen from hardworking Americans by influencer fraud. Colleen stood at the dining room table, folding clothes into a suitcase. She'd been packing since dawn. No conversation, no questions. Just the mechanical process of separating her life from mine, one sweater at a time. I sat on the sofa, coffee cold in my hand, watching CNN replay the moment Cressida's hands went behind her back at gate B12. They'd zoomed in on her face, pixelated it for broadcast standards, added a lower third Chiron, Cressida Prescott, charged wire fraud, conspiracy obstruction. Wayne Baum's 2.1 million followers. The number appeared in every headline, as if the size of her audience made the fraud more significant, as if betraying strangers on the internet weighed differently than betraying family in a living room. Colleen zipped the suitcase. "I'm filing for divorce," she said. No preamble, no emotion, just a statement of operational fact delivered in the same tone I'd used for 28 years of case briefings. I set the coffee cup down. "And that's your right eye," I said. She nodded, once lifted the suitcase and walked to the front door. Stopped, turned. "My attorney says we'll hear from the U.S. Attorney's Office by Thursday." "Probably," I said. She left. The door closed with the soft click of 30 years ending without ceremony. Thursday arrived exactly as predicted. The U.S. Attorney's Office occupied the 5th floor of a brutalist concrete building in D.C. that looked like it had been designed to communicate the weight of federal consequences. Colleen sat across a conference table from AUSA, Catherine Brennan, 39, sharp-eyed prosecutor who'd built her career on white-collar cases. Colleen's defense attorney, Marcus Caldwell, 62 gray-suited veteran of plea negotiations, sat beside her reviewing documents. I stood near the window with Warren Sinclair observing. Brennan slid the plea agreement across the table. Obstruction of justice for the warning text to your daughter. Unreported offshore gambling income, $180,000 over 4 years. We're offering 18 months federal camp. $250,000 restitution. Signed today, report December 1st. Caldwell reviewed the pages, leaned toward Colleen, whispered something I couldn't hear. Colleen picked up the pen. She folded the last sweater without looking at him. The signature took 3 seconds. Her legal name, Colleen Marie Prescott, written in the careful cursive she'd used to sign our marriage license in 1997, our mortgage in 2003. Cressida's school enrollment forms every September for 13 years. Brennan collected the documents. Someone from probation will contact you next week for pre-sentencing. Surrender instructions will arrive by November 15th. Caldwell stood. We'll be in touch. The attorneys filed out. Warren followed, giving me a look that meant he'd wait in the hallway. Colleen and I sat alone in the conference room. 5 minutes. Federal building silence, the kind that absorbs sound and gives nothing back. She spoke first. Will you ever forgive me? I counted 10 seconds before answering. Let the question sit in the air between us, with all its weight and history and 30 years of accumulated debt. I forgave you when I lied 30 years ago, I said quietly. Forgiveness has been mutual since before either of us knew. Her face crumpled. No sound. Just tears tracking down cheeks she didn't bother to wipe, shoulders shaking with the kind of grief that comes from understanding something too late to change it. I didn't move to comfort her. Didn't cross the space between her chair and mine. Didn't offer the reassurance that we'd find our way back, or that 18 months wasn't that long, or that love could survive what we'd put it through. Because none of those things were true. What was true, we'd both chosen our roles over each other. She'd chosen mother, I'd chosen agent. And forgiveness didn't erase the consequences, it just acknowledged we'd both been complicit in building them. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, stood and walked to the door. Stopped. Take care of yourself, Julius. You too. She left without looking back. 30 years of marriage reduced to 18 months, and a signature. Warren stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, watching Colleen disappear toward the elevators. He waited until the doors closed before speaking. Walk with me. We took the stairs down to the 4th floor landing, empty, fluorescent lit, the kind of government building space designed for conversations that couldn't happen in offices with recording equipment. I leaned against the concrete wall. I could have made the gambling evidence disappear, I said. Warren studied me for a long moment. You could have. The offshore accounts were documented in my case files. I had access. I could have deleted the financial trail before it reached Brennan's desk. Colleen would have faced obstruction only, probation. No prison time. You could have, Warren repeated. I didn't. He nodded slowly. That's why you're still here. The words hung in the stairwell like an epitaph for everything I'd sacrificed. My daughter in federal custody. My wife signing plea agreements for crimes I'd documented. My marriage ending in a conference room with government-issue furniture and no ceremony. And Warren Sinclair, Director, Organized Crime Section, FBI, validating that the cost of integrity was keeping my job. 28 years, I said. Brother murdered, marriage destroyed, daughter arrested. And what I get for not destroying evidence against my own wife is, that's why you're still here. Warren's expression didn't change. Yes, no apology, no consolation. Just the operational reality of a career spent choosing mission over family and having that choice validated by the institution that required it. I need you to understand something, Warren said. You could have been a good agent or a good father. The Bureau got a great agent. I'm sorry about the rest. He walked down the stairs, leaving me alone in the landing, with fluorescent lights humming overhead and 30 years of choices I couldn't unmake. I'd kept my integrity. It had cost everything. And Warren was right. That's exactly why I was still here. Dashiell's first words through the two-way mirror glass, you knew from when. 1 week after the arrests, I sat across a Quantico interrogation table from my son-in-law. Orange detention scrubs wrists, shackled to a metal ring, bolted to the floor, 3 days of stubble. Agent Moss stood by the door silent. Warren's words still echoed from the government building. Stairwell integrity costs. Everything keeps you employed. 7 days later, here was the cost. Year 2, I said. The ring, your uncle's crest. I've been watching you eat my daughter's soul for 7 years to get close enough to eat your uncle's empire. Dashiell's laugh was hollow. Year 2, 2019. Ledger was 6 months old. We were living in that Arlington apartment with the broken dishwasher you helped us fix. I remember. You knew then. You let it continue. Yes. Why? Because your uncle had evaded federal prosecution for 47 years. Because the Falcone network had 14 active cells across 6 states. Because my brother died in 1991 and I swore I'd dismantle every piece of the organization that killed him. You married to my daughter, asking me to fix your dishwasher. You were the crack in the wall I'd been trying to find since 1996. So you used her? Yes, just like I did. The symmetry hung between us like a mirror neither wanted to look at. I don't know who's the bigger monster, I said quietly. Me, your uncle, or your father who recruited you at 19. Dashiell's jaw tightened. Don't talk about my father. He trained you? Didn't he taught you how to identify targets? How to build trust? How to marry someone for operational access and make it look like love? She loved me, Dashiell said, voice cracking. Whatever else was true, she loved me. I know, I said. Watching your wife love someone sent to hurt her was the hardest part. The shackles clinked when Dashiell tried to lean forward. You want to know the worst part for me? He asked, realizing I loved her back. That somewhere between the assignment and the Sunday dinners and bedtime stories, I stopped pretending. And it didn't matter, because my father's debts were real, the Falcone expectations were real, and your case was always going to close. I stood. 25 to life. You'll be 63 when you're eligible for parole. Ledger will be 34. He won't remember you. Good, Dashiell whispered. Better he doesn't. I left without looking back. 3 days later, Alexandria City Jail. Bulletproof glass. Stainless steel phone smelling like industrial cleaner. Cressida sat opposite in orange jumpsuit hair, pulled back face stripped of makeup. 10 days in federal custody had aged her a decade. She picked up the phone. I picked up mine. You knew Dashiell was mafia. Her voice came through tinny. You let me marry him. Yes. How could... You were so busy hating me, you didn't see him either, I said. I chose the case over you. I won't apologize for it because I'm not sorry. I'd make the same choice again. But I'll give you the truth every Sunday dinner, every birthday, every moment I watched you build a life with a man I knew was destroying you, I chose the operation. She pressed her palm against the glass, tears tracking down her face. Yet Ledger Pas, she said, I need you to take him. I will. He's 6. He'll ask questions. I'll answer them honestly. He'll hate you. Probably, but he'll be safe and fed. And I'll make sure he knows his mother loved him, even if she couldn't be there. How do you tell your daughter you were only her father, part-time? You don't. You agree to raise her son and hope you do better the second time. I want you to visit, she said, once a year, so he remembers. Once a year, on your birthday, to remind us both. That's not enough. It's all I can give while staying honest, I said. More than that, and I'll start pretending we're something we're not. Once a year, your birthday, I'll bring Ledger, we'll sit in this room. You'll see him grow up in annual snapshots. And when he's old enough, I'll tell him the truth about both of us. I said, so afraid, bait was afraid. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the jumpsuit sleeve. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Was any of it real? Her voice barely a whisper. You loving me? I counted 10 seconds, let the weight of 30 years and 7 years and every Sunday dinner settle between us. Let her see me calculate the answer, the way I'd calculated everything else, weighing truth against kindness, honesty against mercy, the facts against what she needed to hear. Then I gave her what she needed, the truth. Every minute I wasn't on assignment. The phone stayed at her ear. Her face crumpled. The implicit admission hung between us, like evidence submitted for the record. Some minutes were assignment. Some moments of fatherhood had been operational performance. Some of the love she'd received from me had been real, and some had been careful maintenance of cover identity. And I just told her I couldn't distinguish which was which. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, palm still pressed against the glass. I cried too, quietly. The way agents learn to cry without sound, without witnesses, without letting it interfere with operational objectives. The visitation timer hit 0. A guard appeared behind her, tapped her shoulder. She hung up the phone without speaking. I hung up mine. She stood, turned, walked back through the security door to whatever cell they had assigned her while she waited for sentencing. I sat holding a dead phone, staring at bulletproof glass that reflected my own face. 60 years old, deputy assistant director, 28-year operation complete, brother avenged, Falcone network dismantled, marriage destroyed, daughter in federal custody. Grandson now, my responsibility. And the devastating honesty I just delivered, I loved you every minute I wasn't on assignment. Every minute I wasn't, not every minute. Warren slid the classified file across his desk. I can make the offshore evidence disappear, restitutions paid. She walks, you've earned it. 2 weeks after the arrests, I sat in Warren Sinclair's FBI headquarters office, 7th floor, corner view of Pennsylvania Avenue. Walls lined with commendations from 3 decades of organized crime prosecutions. The file between us was thin. Colleen's case, offshore gambling documentation, the evidence I'd compiled myself and refused to destroy. The same evidence Warren was now offering to erase. I'd driven here from Alexandria City Jail, where I'd sat across bulletproof glass from my daughter and delivered the devastating truth that I'd loved her every minute I wasn't on assignment. The weight of that conversation still sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. Warren tapped the file with one finger. 28 years, Julius. Falcone in federal custody. 47 counts. The entire East Coast network dismantled. You've paid every debt the Bureau could ask. You've earned this. Earned what? I asked. Mercy, he said simply. One signature. The offshore evidence vanishes from the record. Restitution's already paid $250,000 cleared last week. Without the gambling charges, she's looking at probation for the warning text. Obstruction first offense mitigating circumstances. She doesn't serve a day. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded across his stomach, watching me with the kind of patience that comes from running investigations that span decades. No one would question it, he continued. I have the authority. You have the record. Falcone's in custody because you spent 28 years becoming someone else. The Bureau owes you more than we can ever repay. Let me give you this. I looked at the file. Thin, maybe 40 pages. Colleen's digital footprint across 4 years of offshore poker sites. Login timestamps, deposit records. The $180,000 trail I'd documented, with the same precision I'd used to document everything else in my operational career. Evidence I could have destroyed before it reached the U.S. attorney. Evidence I'd chosen not to destroy because integrity meant letting the consequences fall where they'd been earned. And now Warren was offering to destroy it for me. The silence lasted 30 seconds by Warren's desk clock. Tick, tick, tick. 30 mechanical increments of time while I calculated the weight of mercy against the weight of justice, the cost of integrity against the cost of loneliness. The value of saving my wife from federal prison against the value of being able to look at myself in a mirror. 30 seconds. Then I spoke. No, I said quietly, let it stand. Warren's expression didn't change. She'll do real time. 18 months, federal camp. It's not hard time, but it's time. I know. You could save her from that. I know. Then why won't you? I chose my words carefully. She earned it, same as me. Different reasons, same act. I let myself do 28 years in a marriage I didn't earn, first one I was assigned to for operational access. That was my choice, my consequences. Now I'm letting her serve the time she earned for trying to save our daughter. Those are her consequences, her choice. That's not equality, Warren said. That's cruelty. It's the only equality I have left to give her, I said. If I erase the evidence, I'm still the handler, still the agent managing assets, still the one with power deciding who pays and who doesn't. But if I let it stand, if I let her face the same justice system I used against everyone else, then for once in 30 years, we're on the same level. Warren studied me for a long moment. You're the most stubborn man I've ever known, he said finally. That's why we got Falcone, I replied. He nodded slowly. Yes, it is. I stood. The conversation was over. The file would stay in the record. Colleen would report to federal camp on December 1st. 18 months. She'd serve every day because I'd refused mercy when it was offered by the one person with authority to grant it. Is integrity the price of loneliness, or loneliness the price of integrity? I didn't know. I only knew that 30 years of choosing mission over family had calcified into something I couldn't bend even when I wanted to. Even when mercy was sitting on a desk in a thin file waiting for one word, yes, that I couldn't make my mouth form. Take care of yourself, Julius, Warren said. You too. I walked to the door, hand on the knob, and paused. Thank you, I said, without turning around, for offering. I knew you'd say no, Warren replied, but I had to offer anyway. I left his office and didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me. Warren sat alone at his desk, staring at the classified file that would have saved a marriage, spared a woman from prison. Given a 60-year-old agent one small piece of redemption after 3 decades of sacrifice. The file Julius Prescott had refused because refusing was the only thing he knew how to do. Warren picked it up, opened his desk drawer, and filed it under Prescott Colleen. Case closed, evidence retained. Then he leaned back in his chair and whispered to the empty office. And that's why you'll never be happy. Outside, I walked into October DC daylight, 3:15 p.m. The afternoon sun cut through buildings and cast long shadows across Pennsylvania Avenue. Pedestrians hurried past in both directions, lawyers, lobbyists, tourists taking photos of government buildings that house the machinery of federal justice. I walked with my shoulders squared, my gait steady, my operational mask perfectly in place. Unaware that 7 floors above me in a corner office with a view I'd never see again, my director had just spoken my epitaph. I'd chosen integrity. It had cost me everything. And Warren was right, it would never make me happy. But it was the only choice I knew how to make. The cabin in West Virginia had no internet, no case files, and one 7-year-old boy who called me grandpa and meant it. 8 months after walking out of Warren's office into October daylight, I sat on a porch that faced mountains instead of surveillance monitors. Drinking coffee that didn't taste like bureau break rooms, reading emails on a phone I checked once a week instead of once an hour. The updates arrived in careful bureaucratic language. Cressida's pre-sentencing report recommended 5 years federal minimum security, eligible for early release after 42 months with good behavior. Her attorney, court-appointed. Competent, had negotiated down from the prosecutor's initial 8-year ask. Dashiell's cooperation deal had delivered what 28 years of surveillance couldn't testimony, detailed enough to secure the Don's life sentence on all 47 federal counts. In exchange, Dashiell would serve 12 years instead of 25. He'd be 51 when released. Ledger would be 19. Colleen was 6 months into Aliceville Federal Camp. The facility administrator's quarterly report noted she'd joined the literacy program, taught basic budgeting to 3 younger inmates. Kept to herself otherwise. 12 months remaining. She'd be out by next December. And at the bottom of the inbox, Child Services Bethesda office subject line, urgent, guardianship required. I opened it. Ledger Prescott, age 7, requires permanent guardian placement. Mother federal custody 60 months. Father witness protection identity sealed. Maternal grandmother, deceased 2019. Paternal grandfather you. Are you willing to assume legal guardianship? Och is he same for das noer status with sorrows. I stared at the message for 30 seconds. Then I typed one word, yes. 2 days later, I drove to Bethesda and collected my grandson from a social worker named Patricia Dunn, who handed me a backpack containing 3 changes of clothes, 1 stuffed dinosaur, and a Pokemon journal with crayon drawings of creatures I didn't recognize. He's been asking for you, Patricia said, every day for 2 weeks. Ledger stood beside her small hand, gripping her sleeve, eyes locked on me, with the kind of wariness that comes from losing both parents in the same month and not understanding why. Grandpa, he said quietly. Yeah, buddy, I replied. Let's go home. A week later, we sat in the cabin living room with a chess set I'd bought from a secondhand store in Elkins, wooden pieces carved with more enthusiasm than skill, the kind of set that had taught 100 other children before Ledger. I showed him how each piece moved, the pawns, the bishops, the knights with their strange L-shaped jumps. He absorbed it all with the focused attention of someone who'd learned early that details mattered. Then he picked up the king. Why does he only move 1 square? Ledger asked. Because he's the most important piece, I said. The slowest one on the board. Everyone else protects him, but one day he moves just 1 square and the whole board changes. Was the king scared? I paused the question heavier than the carved wood in his palm. Yes, I said, but he'd been waiting years to be brave. The chess piece felt heavier in my hand than any weapon ever had. Ledger studied the king, turning it over, examining the crown carved into the top. Grandpa, he said, are you the king? I met his eyes 7 years old, asking questions I'd spent 60 years avoiding. I used to be, I said. Now I'm just your grandpa. My phone buzzed on the side table. Screen lit. Warren Sinclair, FBI HQ. I looked at it. Looked at Ledger carefully placing the king back in the center of the board, resetting the pieces for another game, his small fingers precise and patient. I reached over and silenced the call without answering. Ledger glanced up. Was that important? Not anymore, I said. Your move. Late that night, after Ledger had fallen asleep upstairs, clutching the stuffed dinosaur, I sat on the porch with whiskey and a new journal. Blank pages. No Visionaire cipher, no operational codes, no subject surveillance logs or evidence documentation. Just empty-lined paper waiting for whatever truth I could manage to write without encryption. I opened to the first page and wrote, Day 1, no mission, no cover, no subject. Just one boy upstairs asleep who calls me Grandpa and means it. The whiskey burned the same way it had for 30 years, but the silence around it felt different. No case files humming in the background. No encrypted phones charging on every surface. No wife sleeping 3 feet away from someone she didn't actually know. Just mountains and darkness. And a 7-year-old breathing steadily in the room above my head. 28 years of moves reduced to one 7-year-old asking if kings get scared. I thought about Warren's whispered prophecy in his empty office. And that's why you'll never be happy. He was probably right. Happiness wasn't what I'd earned. Wasn't what the last 3 decades had built toward. You don't destroy a family for operational success and wake up one morning suddenly content. But sitting here, West Virginia mountains breathing around, me grandson safe upstairs, no lies to maintain, no cover to protect. No assignment to complete, I'd found something that felt closer to peace than anything happiness had ever offered. In 5 years, Cressida would be released. I'd keep the promised annual birthday visits ledger, watching his mother age in federal custody through bulletproof glass. Annual snapshots of a childhood she'd miss. In 12 years, Dashiell would walk free. Ledger would be 19, old enough to decide whether the man who'd pretended to be his father deserved forgiveness. In 12 months, Colleen would finish her sentence. We'd signed divorce papers that had been waiting in an attorney's office since last November. She'd start over. So would I. But right now, early June 2025, pre-dawn mountains beginning to lighten. With the first suggestion of sunrise, I had one grandson who needed a grandfather more than the Bureau needed another operative. The slowest piece on the board, the most important one, waiting years to be brave enough to move one square. I used to be the king. Now I was just protecting the next move on the board. I wrote the final line in the journal, the words forming on the page like an answer to a question I'd been asking since a $60,000 party, where my daughter handed me a $45,000 check and humiliated me in front of strangers who'd never know I'd been documenting her husband's crimes for 7 years. The slow ones. The brave ones. The 7-year-old ones. I closed the journal and watched the mountains catch fire with dawn. And to you listening to my story, remember this: some victories cost more than any defeat ever could. I spent 28 years choosing mission over family. I told myself it was justice for my brother, that dismantling the Falcone network would honor his memory. But the truth is simpler. I knew how to be an operative. I didn't know how to be a father. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait until you're watching your own daughter in handcuffs to realize you've been fighting the wrong battle. This family betrayal, my family betraying me betraying them, didn't have to happen. Every family story has a lesson hidden inside it. Mine taught me that integrity without compassion is just another form of cruelty. Yes, I got justice. The case closed successfully. But the cost my daughter imprisoned my marriage ended 30 years of lies. Was it worth it? I believe God allowed this family betrayal to show me what winning actually costs. The real victory wasn't in the arrests. It was in the second chance, with my grandson finally choosing family first. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a choice between duty and family? How did you decide? Leave a comment below. Your perspective might help someone wrestling with the same choice. If this family story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories about the impossible choices we all face. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means more than you know. A final reminder: some elements have been fictionalized for reflection and storytelling. What I hope you take away is the lesson: choose the people you love before it's too late.